but
Oh.
we gotta end the urban renewal session when the bear passes out.
Test,
insurance.
As far as
Pick the architect.
concrete work and everything,
test, too close or not far enough? Good?
We have a team of consumer advocates.
Okay.
They're consumer advocates, but they're also manufacturers.
Great group. Totally do.
other than that, I think they've got.
We are wired.
That wasn't part of the Dell system.
Now I've been doing a lot of work with John Day, homeowners, responsible buyers.
Wonderful restaurant.
I'm out there.
Yeah. Maybe get honest answers, huh?
There's like the only person that remembers that he was on city
Travel. It's an agency I had no idea existed in Florida.
Remy was supposed to be here.
But we do a lot of good.
We have to wait for Remy, and that's.
Our $2.2 million in unpaid claims we recovered for consumers last year.
It was just for a little while.
What island did you go to in Hawaii?
This time we went
Never
to the
ran.
Big Island. We stayed about 20 miles up the coast from
Maryland?
Kona State
How are
Waikiki.
you?
Still
Upfloat,
Third
like
Street,
the village or
We
the?
go back
The
and
village.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We stayed at
Best
Kingsland.
of both worlds.
If you turn to go to where Hilton Village is, and you just stay on that road, and you go another half a mile. On the right side.
It's been a long time since I've been up to your place. It was Bledsoe when she ran for office. You
Operational.
guys were remodeling the ballroom.
We finally did finish the ballroom.
Ah,
It stopped for a long time while we did the rest of the work, but
Branches and everything.
Okay, when folks are ready, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Is this mic doing okay on everybody's ears? Good. My name is Sue Disciple, and I'll be the facilitator for the meeting. And before I go any further,
I
Rick,
just have
yes?
a couple, I guess, Sue, before you get started, a
Yeah.
few official things to do.
Yes, sir.
It is now 6:08, I'll do this officially, 6:08 PM, and I'd like to call to order the joint meeting of the McMinnville Urban Renewal Agency and the McMinnville Urban Renewal Advisory Committee for a joint work session. Being that called to order, we have a couple things before we get in, one thing before we get into the work session. In the information you were sent were the minutes in the June 23rd, 2015 Urban Renewal Agency Board meeting. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes? And if so, I will entertain a motion that we accept the minutes or change the minutes.
So moved.
So moved by, was that you, Scott? By Counselor Hilda, second?
Second?
Second by Council President Jeffrey. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And one other thing, just a little clarity I want to add, we are being streamed live tonight besides Comcast and Frontier. We are being streamed live via KLYC. They've been streaming the city council meetings also. So what I ask that you do is please to speak up to make sure that they can hear you on the live stream, so anybody that's tuned in can hear you. And if anybody here has a cell phone, we ask that you put it on mute so it isn't ringing. And of course, try to avoid taking any calls. And if you do have to take any calls or any texts for emergency nature, please go out in the lobby to do that. And what I'd also like to do is maybe, and I'll turn it over to our great fearless leader, Sue, who we love to see come down here, and maybe we can start our work session to just go around, since the stream can't see some of the name tags, that we all start. Kim, we'll start with you, and introduce yourself, and if you represent an organization, what organization you represent.
Kim Carr, General Manager of McMinnville Water and Light.
Kevin Jeffries, McMinnville City Council.
Carolyn Warwicks.
Larry Yoder, City Council.
Kelly McDonald, the Granary District and McMinnville Economic Development Partnership.
Wendy Stathens with the Planning Commission and the Urban Renewal Advisory.
Rick Olson, Mayor.
Walt Gal with the Advisory Committee for the Urban Renewal District.
And Martha Meeker, City Manager.
Jeb Ledeen with the Advisory Committee of the Urban Renewal District. Scott Hill, City Council.
Cassie Sollers with the Urban Renewal Advisory Committee.
We do have Councilor Rudin excused absence from our work session tonight. We are expecting that Councilor Drapkin will be in attendance tonight. So that being said, we're officially in session. And so now, Sue, I will turn over to you for the work session.
Great, thank you. And I'd just like to point out that Doug Montgomery and Marcia Baggery and Rose Lorenzen are also here, staff from the city. So, you have an agenda in front of you, and I'd like to just give you a brief walkthrough of that agenda. And before that, a little bit of background of how the agenda, you see it in front of you, came to be. And I'd like to thank Scott and Walt for spending time on the phone with me in advance of putting this agenda together so that I could get an understanding of what the aspirations were for this meeting. Unbeknownst to them, I take really good notes. And we had a great time talking. Scott and I, of course, go back a ways because I've been the facilitator for the city council for quite a few years for their goal setting. But Walt I just met, and we found out that we share an entire trajectory from the East Coast to our beautiful state. So we had a wide-ranging conversation, but what I learned is that the outcome that these two told me this group hopes to achieve is to move closer to making a decision. Not that a decision will be made about anything necessarily at this meeting, but just to really see where consensus might be shaping up, where people's thought processes are coming together. And so that's one piece. Eventually, an aspiration is, of course, to establish a suite of projects for 5 years out. But tonight is a beginning of that and not the end game of that. Also, Walt, you said it would be good for council and the committee to establish some kind of a formal relationship, a formal system of check-ins or reporting. And the committee really would like to hear from council what you expect of us as your committee. So that's something that we'll discuss in the meeting today. And then also just to get the council up to speed on the road that the committee has traveled to where they're coming together, where you are coming together now. And so those are the purposes of this meeting. So I think we'll travel quite an interesting road to get there. To look at the agenda itself, we're going to have some level setting to begin with. City staff is going to do an overview of the potential projects in the Urban Renewal District. We'll take a look at the financial assumptions, sources of funds, potential amounts, timeframes, anticipated implications. We'll look at the lessons learned from other jurisdictions with urban renewal districts. We'll look at where we are now with the urban renewal plan, and then there'll be some discussion. And what I want to hear from all of you is, so what kind of assumptions would you draw about your urban renewal district decision-making based on that background, that level setting? Then we'll go into a consideration of what some alternatives might be. The committee can then present the status of its thinking now. I try to couch that task in some pretty broad language. I call that proposed direction. Some committee members may feel you have a firm direction at this point, and some may not. But just to hear what the thinking of the committee members are is the place to start. And then city staff is going to talk about any other kind of corresponding or complementary approaches. And then we'll have some additional discussion. So what assumptions can we draw when we see the options as they're arrayed before us? Then, council, we're going to hear from you. What are your preliminary thoughts about what you've heard? And then we'll speak a little bit to the committee process and what councils expect of the committee, what committee needs from council. So that's our trajectory for the evening. Does anybody have any questions about the agenda? So hearing none, just one other process consideration. I am a facilitator, and so I do like to let people know what I'm going to be facilitating for. So if everybody could just take one of these little sticky notes and affix it to your agenda. I did ask, I'm kind of telling tales on Walt and Scott here, but I did ask both Scott and Walt, what advice would you give me as a facilitator? They both said, we've got really astute people here, and sometimes they think deep thoughts. So we've got a lot of ground to cover, so we might need help moving our conversation along. So I'm going to ask you, pertaining to that point on the agenda, to please focus on precisely where we are in our agenda for the night. If shiny objects come by that would be fun to talk about, we'll put them in a little bowl all by themselves and keep track of them for another day. The next one is frankness. This would be good for people to speak frankly about what you're thinking about now on this issue. You couple that with fairness and courtesy, and you've got a really great discussion. I guess the other two things that are on there are, which I'm stepping over right now, are brevity. If you see me given the New Jersey roll, I'm asking you to wind up your comments and let somebody else have the floor. And if we have a lot of frequent flyers who take up a lot of the airtime, we'll go to round robin so everybody gets a chance. So those, just to warn you, if you see me going like this, it's because of one of those 6 things. So, with that, Walt, Mr. Mayor, opening remarks.
How about y'all, as mayor, first of all, I'd just like to thank everybody for getting together. I think the focus, and Sue talked a little bit about the focus. I think we're to the point now where we've been working on urban renewal for a little bit, and last time we met, I think was June of last year in 2015. And I think it's time that we look at what's the next step, what do we move forward, and how we move forward. And looking at the members of MIRIC and the council that we have, I think we can come out of this process with a pretty good direction. So again, I just want to thank everybody for their involvement from my standpoint, from the standpoint of the city council, and I'm looking for big things to come out of this tonight. So Walt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to say that I'm grateful to Jeb for emailing Doug, who emailed me and pointed out that I was going to make some opening remarks tonight, which had gone directly by me. So I actually had to think about this, so I wrote down a few things, and these aren't in any particular order of importance, but things that I thought that this meeting and the process could benefit from. And the first thought that came to me was know the plan. In other words, the City Council went through a 2-year process of adopting an urban renewal plan, and it has a lot in it. And so this group does not have to start from scratch. It has a large foundation of master planning that's gone on in the past and prioritization that's been undertaken. And there is a starting place called the Urban Renewal Plan. So first, know the plan. What are the projects? What are the financing capabilities of the Urban Renewal District? Where is the plan? Obviously, we're very close to the beginning, but the plan is gaining speed rapidly, kind of forced along by the road bond, which is a good thing, I think. Do you follow the plan or do you modify the plan? Those are key issues to me at this juncture. Second, follow a process. Maintain a good, strong advisory process. Hold regular sessions. Hire appropriate consultants to assist. Review the status of events regularly. And report regularly back to the City Council. Now, I'm talking mainly about the Advisory Committee, obviously, but the challenge for us is not to get isolated from the City Council because the City Council is the decision maker. We're just here to give our thoughts. Third, what's the current status of the advisory process? It's fair to say that the Alpine project has been jump-started by the road bond, and that the preliminary engineering is well underway, that public involvement has been sought, that the council is about to get involved in adopting a design project. In other words, that's looming on your agenda, coming before you, I think yet this month or next month. I'm not sure which. And so once the council adopts a design concept for that project, the further decision has to be made, does the urban renewal district augment that project or not? And the views, obviously, of the members of the the advisory committee are partially what we're here tonight to hear and to interact with. And finally, what's the financial feasibility of doing this? Is it possible at this time to augment that project, and if so, by how much? Fourth, and finally, it's important that timely decisions be made going forward. And so the first timely decision probably that the challenge is to make is how much support is the Urban Renewal District going to provide to the Alpine project at the outset? Second, and related to that, because there's a very related project called the Fifth Street Improvement Project, which is the corridor between downtown and the Granary District, which is the entrance to the Alpine District. And how much involvement should the Urban Renewal District lend to that particular project at this early juncture? Should the Urban Renewal District accelerate the initial downtown master plan improvements that were originally envisioned to occur sometime around 2017, 2018? Should those be brought forward a year or so in the planning process? What is the most cost-effective way to finance the Urban Renewal District's involvement at whatever level that the council decides to undertake? And what methods of financing utilize the city's good credit without placing city revenues at undue risk? So that's a balancing act that the council has to make. And finally, how and how often does the city council want to consult with the advisory committee like we're doing tonight? So how often should this process go on? Should it be annual? Should it be biannual? And so forth. So those are the thoughts that came to me this morning after I, in a panic, discovered I was supposed to say something at the outset.
Sorry about that, Walt.
Chair.
I will put, those were excellent remarks on the fly, but I will put that as a seventh little bullet on my thing to myself. Warn speakers of obligation to speak.
So read agendas.
Right,
Is the
message. So just kind of as the final piece of base touching, before we dive into the overview and then the discussion, I thought it would be good to just do a round robin and do a base touching with what the vision for this urban renewal in McMinnville is. And if somebody wants to pull on that thread, I would say just speak to briefly, in a sentence or two, about what seems really opportunistic or crucial or important or wonderful about this for you. When you think about the Urban Renewal District, what's most exciting for you, or what's your aspiration? And then let's just go around and hear from everybody.
I'll start. For me, it's an opportunity to utilize a resource, legal resource, to generate funds to complete projects and encourage investment that otherwise wouldn't be possible. We have a award-winning downtown that we want to maintain. It's difficult to do that with traditional funding sources, both at the city level as well as individual property owners. So to have this financing tool available to encourage development and then reap the benefits of that through the tax increment financing allows us to do some exciting things to keep McMinnville really out in front of a lot of communities and livability and just tourism is a big part of our economy now, and that'll continue to develop as we make improvements to the urban renewal area.
Yeah, great, thank you. Shall we just travel around in a circle? Sure, yeah.
Well, I guess I was involved with the Northeast Gateway as well, and that partly encouraged us to look at the urban renewal district. We have an area of town. Kelly has been instrumental in starting a spark there. It's very underutilized with regards, it's in the core of the town, it's underutilized with regards to what its uses are now. And so I think some of the excitement for me is that we already have a downtown I'm a realtor and also in construction, and we work with a lot of people that come from out of town, out of state, that are building and moving here. And almost everyone moves here partly because of our downtown. So we already have this gem of a downtown, and we have the opportunity to make it even better. So, and we have underutilized area that we can really propel forward into something great. So that's what drives me.
Yeah. Oh, great.
I think one of the things that drives me the most is that it isn't, I'd like to say it isn't what we necessarily have above the ground, because I think it's very well, but the whole infrastructure of our urban renewal area, whether it be Main Street, whether it be Fifth Street as part of the transportation bond, whether it be the Northeast Gateway area, is I think we're rapidly falling, in infrastructure, we're rapidly falling behind doing some of the repairs we need to do, and how we could leverage the urban renewal district to make those infrastructure repairs that will allow us to expand and build on top of that. So we are in a mode of fixing, tearing down, fixing, tearing out. So I think the infrastructure is a big one. And as part of the infrastructure, I think the biggest issue to me right now that seems to come up the last year is what, since we have such a vibrant downtown area, how through urban renewal can we address, for visitors, address the parking issues downtown. I think the parking issues are a very big situation with me. So.
I probably had my turn, but let me just be brief and say that we've had a visioning process that evolved into a master planning process in downtown McMinnville and on into the Gateway District, which left a lot of unfulfilled goals, which required a significant amount of both private and public investment. So Kelly mentioned the notion of stimulating investment, and I see an urban renewal district at its core as a vehicle for stimulating investment both by the community, the existing property owners, and by newcomers to the community as a method of carrying out the vision that so many people have looked down the road to try and create.
Thanks.
I guess going down the line here,
Yeah.
it's exciting to see taking that vision and watching folks actually execute it, because, you know, the urban renewal is built to enhance and reflect the culture of what McMinnville has. It's not something that's going to bring us into the 22nd century or whatever. It's not something new. It's something that's going to be a direct reflection of what this town is. I mean, we stated, you know, it's going to be historic and it's going to be focused on craftsmanship. And so I think that's exciting as a you know, something to continually to cement what McMinnville stands for. And it's also fun to watch all the citizen participation here, because it's a continuation of bringing a lot of synergies together. You know, you have folks who are businessmen in that area. You have other opportunities with other agencies, from Visit McMinnville to working with the MDA. So for that, it's exciting to me to look out 20 years and actually envision that cultural center even growing even more. And it's just fun to watch everybody here make it.
Yeah, great.
I guess I see this as part of sort of fulfilling the dream. And we've been fulfilling the dream in McMinnville for 130 or 40 years. There's always another 20 years and another 20 years. But and this is one of a long series of processes that can do that. But the other thing is that I've been driving on 3rd Street for 52 years. I was dragging the gut when Reuben was in toddling clothes, but if that. And for some years, I've started to vision being in some kind of really unfortunate accident in this core area. It's you know, it's nerve-wracking an awful lot as a pedestrian and as a driver and as the parking has jammed up and the traffic has increased and the railroad crossings have been closed and everything is tighter, and so I'm really anxious to see things like the transportation plan and urban renewal open the thing up, make it sort of help fulfill the dream of a user-friendly core area as it continues to develop. So. You weren't dragging the gut that long.
For me, we all talk about and we love the downtown area, but I feel so fortunate as I look around the room. Marilyn and Walt and Jeb and Cassie have really been around a long time to really drive part of this master plan for a downtown, and I think, in my mind, that's what it started, was to enhance the downtown. We've had great plans, but we've never had any money. And then we had something called the Northeast Gateway that came on board, and then urban renewal that we included. And so I see it as taking care of what we've got, kind of perfecting the gem that we have. And I think Jeb was talking a little bit about that. We've got some great things on plans that could enhance downtown, but also looking at growth in the granary area and the alpine area. That's our future, and being able to blend that together. And I think that's the real crux of what we need to do, is where and how, and mixing that together and coming up with the perfect formula that's going to bring success.
I think, from my perspective, and it's probably a little more ethereal, Jeb and Walt and Marilyn and those of us, and Rick, those of us who've been around for a long time, have watched different generations give volunteer time and expertise, and the city staff giving what they give and coming up with plans that are executed, sometimes slowly, sometimes more quickly. But the juxtaposition of being at the age that I am and knowing quite possibly I won't see what is being planned today is kind of one of those reality checks that just says, this is what it's like. This is what it's like to invest something not only for now, but for the future. And we have been doing that in this community, as Jeb said, for 130, 140 years. And it's a real privilege to be able to be part of that. I think I agree with what everyone is saying, that downtown is a gem. I am looking forward to having the downtown have a partnership that just grows with Granary District, with the Northeast Gateway, and to watch that develop and know that the people in this room and those people before us and those people after us will be doing the same thing. And I think that's the legacy we leave. So it's not so much as a concrete vision as it is a personal journey. And I think that's really important.
Thank you. So, Remy, do you get the drift of what's happening here? Okay.
My apologies to everybody for not being able to be here, for being tardy this evening, and I'm just going to listen at this point, I think.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Brief. It's a brief sentence or two on what this urban renewal effort means to you. But anyway, yeah, I'll circle back around to you. Ken?
So to me, it's a very good opportunity to have as close to a blank slate to existing culture and development that hopefully you can make it multi-use. And so one of the things that I've noticed in towns and cities and where I live, there's very few places that have a functional, truly multi-use urban renewal. And so I've heard a lot of people say and continue to say about downtown area, which is great, and there's a part of it. I have more interest in having a multi-use that covers the opportunity of living and also occupations and the retail area.
Great.
So for me, I was fairly skeptical of this whole idea at the beginning, but after hearing the ideas and really taking an assessment of those people involved in it, I can't think of a better city where we could do this. We have so much talent in this city. We have, as we expand that area into economic, for more commercial and other uses, we have the resources here to help those businesses thrive. And I think if it was any other city, Jeb, you really said something that kind of struck me about your experience down on 3rd Street, probably back when it was a dirt road.
Gravel.
The horse and buggy.
Gravel. The street that I live on wasn't not long ago that it was a dirt road. But anyways, I like to canoe, I like the kayak. But if you've ever been on a lake in a really, really short kayak, it's really hard to keep it straight. you know, and as a young guy, sometimes I feel like I'm in a short kayak, but having Jeb and Cassie and Marilyn, you know, your experience in the city, you have a very long perspective on things and are able to keep things straight and really have a vision for where we've been and where we're going, much broader than I do. So I'm moving into this with much more confidence because you're all at the table, and I really appreciate you being a part of it and letting me be a part of it. This is really cool because I hope to be able to live to see this.
Well, I do too, really.
I'm sure we'll make it.
It's the nicest way to say we're old. I have been a really long time. Walt was reminding me the other day that in 1982, he and I had lunch over at Michael Book, and I was talking him into doing some free work to do the Downtown Association formalized papers or something. And I reminded him that he is still involved, whereas I retired a long time ago. What it means to me is two things. It means that we can continue to do it right, because goodness knows McMinnville has done it right. Look at the downtown and what everybody has said. And that we can plan it. So often, this kind of development has to be done piece by piece by piece because you don't have the resources to do any planning. We have done plans here in the past that have sat on the shelf. This is a chance to do a plan that doesn't sit on the shelf, and that's what urban renewal means to me. So that's why I'm excited about it.
Well, to have the opportunity to use the tools that we have available to us through the tax increment and the transportation bond, and to be able to expand into the area and increase the attraction and the vitality of the whole downtown, that whole urban renewal area, excites me because it's going to bring more of a diversification in. It isn't just going to be shops on 3rd Street. It's going to be, as Mr. Carr was saying, a multi-purpose thing and usage. And I see that as a huge attraction and an enhancement of the downtown and the whole city itself, and making it an attractive place where people can establish their businesses, as Kelly said, and to invest in it and make it vibrant and productive. And I'm excited about that future of that.
Great, thank you. Remy, you want to take a shot at this while you're excited about this?
Yeah. Well, I've been excited about this for a long time. I've been really impressed with the kind of the long-term vision of the urban renewal district and the financing that was put in place and how that was developed, and then the commitment that's come along with it, especially from some really dedicated community members. Kelly McDonald, especially, I know, and a number of people that have, and Walt, you have given a tremendous amount of time to making this happen. I'm interested at this point to see how it plays out. I think that there's a lot of challenges that are going to come up, even though it's exciting and positive and a wonderful thing that it's already a mixed-use area and has a unique set of challenges within that, and I'm both happy and excited to see how that changes and develops, and also very curious at how that will play out. And I feel very confident that it'll play out wonderfully because of this team of people who've been working on this for a very long time. Working on this for a long time. So that's kind of my thinking on the general urban district.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful thing for me.
Yeah, great. Wow. Even the facilitator feels the adrenaline, you know? It's really exciting. What an opportunity for such a great town. So, anybody else want to, is there anything that didn't get said? Well, in that case, I think it's time, Doug, if you want to have the floor and talk about a little bit about more specifics and potential projects.
I think I've been advised realize I need to have a microphone or something so we record. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Do you want to trade places?
Oh, you're fine. So I'm going to probably pace anyway, so if you don't mind. I'm going to hand out copies of what I'm going to show you on the screen. And much like a good book, please don't flip to the last page to see how the story ends. I'll take it away from you if you do. Problem. Pardon?
Do you want the, do you?
Before it started, I really appreciate all the comments you shared, and on a personal level, this has been one of my greatest joys in my 30-some years of working in this profession, is to work with a group like this with such passion around this project. Let me share just a little story. Before I came to this place, I was working in a town in southern Oregon. In 85, I put together an urban renewal plan for that community. I left there in 86. We had just sold the bonds for that first set of projects. I happened to have an occasion in an interview here for a job for our city attorney where the person was from Climate Falls. She was commenting that they were now closing out that urban renewal district after 25 years. And so it made me feel really old, Kevin, at that point. But I think the reality is that we all get to see the efforts and your work here. And it'll be amazing to see it. With that said, Susan asked me to be the warm up act before the main act. So in that spirit, I'll be quick and get off the stage so you can get back to the work that's very real here. What I'm going to provide for you is some context, some food for thought, and maybe a little bit of inspiration that will help feed your conversations that will occur after I'm done here. The topics I've provided to you, I'm sure, are very heavy in text. The purpose of that is so that you can keep those and refer to the material that's in there for reference as we go through the conversation. Sue's asked me to talk on 4 points, and they differ a little bit from your agenda in the lessons learned. I'm going to save that for the final piece. Just again to remind you, we have a 175-acre area that we're talking about. It includes lands generally on the west from Adams Street to the east on Logan and Lafayette Avenue, and to the south, 1st Street, and to the north, generally around 7th Street. It does not include county or other government properties for the most part. When we talk about the potential projects that are in that plan, they fall into 4 large categories. We have public infrastructure that accounts for about 85% of the total funding. And then you see the others. We have property acquisition, debt service, project administration, and then what we call planning and development assistance programs. And I've identified some projects that are within those categories. Unless there are any questions about those, again, I'm just going to keep moving through this. This is something that you've all been through for the most part. Getting to an area that Marcia will beat me on the head if I misstate anything, I'm sure. But the financial assumptions that drive this plan are important to understand. The frozen base, for example, is $86 million. That's the base that's established. That then every bit of our tax increments based upon that figure. Our maximum indebtedness is $30 million, and for those of the advisory committee and some of the council members who were at our work session last week, I think Elaine impressed upon us the need to keep track of that number. That's an amount of money that we can spend over the 25 or 30 years of this project on projects. And then also under that, you see some tax increment finance revenue figures that are offered to you in 5-year chunks, and you see it doesn't take very long until we have a very significant amount of money in which to do projects. The table on the right-hand side of this half of the screen is the more complete table. It shows the year-by-year projections. The far right-hand column, if you could read that, shows that tax increment finance projections and those estimates. Again, the plan is driven by these estimates. You also, I think, were provided a copy of a letter from Q1 Win, if I'm not butchering her pronunciation of her name, with Western Financial Group. And again, not going into deep detail, but she provides 3 different ways that we could finance with elevated levels of risk assumed on each of those different scenarios. One being that the Urban Renewal Agency operates as its own bank. It borrows. The other are through the city's full faith and credit obligations. Again, the risk on those is that you then secure that loan with general fund monies if the tax increment financing debt service cannot be met. I think you may have read in the past that the City of Independence got into that kind of a situation some years ago, issued bonds, I think in about 2007. We know what happened in 2008, and they found themselves trying to backfill that gap with some, by cutting some librarians. Don't worry, Jenny, we're watching you. Where we are now, we've done quite a bit. This committee, the advisory committee, first started meeting in March of 2014. In that time, you may not have thought you're making a lot of progress, but we've done a number of administrative things that I think Elaine Howard tried to impress upon us, and we need to get that in order. We have an intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Urban Renewal Agency that spells out responsibilities and duties. We've established the McMinnville Urban Redevelopment Advisory Committee. You've been meeting on a quite regular basis, especially the last few weeks. And we have 2 budgets under our belts. We've budgeted very conservatively in each of those and have been surprised by the tax increment proceeds that have been realized. On the project side, Alpine Avenue, we're extremely fortunate with the vote in November of last year to have about $2.1 million project in our lap now to improve Alpine Avenue, or at least a portion of Alpine Avenue. Again, we also met just very recently, last Tuesday evening, with Elaine Howard and the Assistant City Manager from the City of Sherwood and the Community Development Director for the City of Albany, who shared their experiences with us about their best practices for managing an urban renewal session. And I'd be very curious, because we have not met since then, to hear your reflections on that at some point during the evening. And then finally, we have a small facade improvement grant program that's kicked off. One result of that project is shown in the picture below with the Klein Chevrolet picture that you see on the side of the Chaos Building downtown. And again, continuing with the where we are now theme, if we peek around the corner a little bit to see what's just ahead of us, I talked about a couple of things here. In terms of future staffing and agency organization, it's my sense that as this organization, this project evolves, it will become more complex. It may require different skill sets than you currently have at your disposal. So that's something we need to keep in front of us as we move forward with that. Also, there's the policy question of how much money do you push toward the administration side of the project, knowing that that administration cost counts against your maximum indebtedness. In our current plan, there's a little over $1 million earmarked for administration of this project over the 25-year life of the plan. Right now, I don't believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Martha or Marcia, that we're not plugging any administration costs from city staff into that project. In terms of communication, I think Walt hit on that theme earlier, so I won't talk any more about it this time, but certainly communication. And if I had one critique about myself, there needs to be more and better communication between the various bodies that come in contact with this effort. And we'll certainly need to address that. The other things that are on our short near-term project list would be, again, we've talked a lot about the Alpine Avenue project. We'll get a lot more discussion about that, I'm sure, this evening. And I know the advisory committee has spent a fair amount of time talking about that and their desire to extend the scope of that project, if at all possible. The project priorities need to come up with some process to identify clearly how those decisions are made and evaluating those. And then finally, the urban renewal plan update. Although only a few years old, we didn't foresee that our voters would be so generous in pass a transportation bond. And we have a good number of transportation-related projects in those project lists that we need to probably go back and revisit and possibly shift some of that funding around. Lessons learned, what I took away, and these reflect only my observations, there are probably a longer list from the people that attended the meeting on past Tuesday, but important to take the long view of this process. Again, 25 years in length, and to be patient with its progress. The administrative procedures I talked about earlier, we continue to work on those. We'll refine those as we move forward. Again, I won't go through this in any greater length than I already have, but again, those were the themes that I remember hearing. And again, if anybody has any reflections on that at this point, well, one thing I want to leave you with is just a little bit of inspiration as you now move into the conversations about what could be. You know, I picked a couple of quotes, one from Gloria Steinem and one from Daniel Burnham. And I will let you read those. But wouldn't it be wonderful if that building on the upper right-hand corner someday could be this, if you can imagine Lafayette Avenue in the front and heading back toward 8th Street on the other side. And Bellingham, actually, Bellingham, Washington. Yeah, on their waterfront. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that project. I don't know if it ever happened. I know they were taking proposals back in 2012, but even as their name. So with that, I will stop and entertain any questions or comments, or turn this back to Sue.
Doug, there's just a quick question. There was a discrepancy in the frozen base between this report and the spreadsheet we got.
Okay.
86, I just wondered if I mean, the text says 86 million and this is a 93 million.
The plan shows at 93. When the final count was made by the assessor's office, it was certified at 86. So our consultants, what they did is their numbers were off by that much.
So the actual is 86?
The actual is 86.
The sheet we got is based on 93?
Correct. And I have not gone back and tried to determine where that error was made. They may have used the 2013-14 assessment, when in fact we used the 2012-13 assessment.
Okay.
So from people's overview of the strategic landscape just now, and from the probably even deeper understanding than that you have of it, having studied this opportunity for quite some time, and Doug just gave us a pretty nifty but short overview. Are there any assumptions that you would take away from where you are now in this landscape? So to put you in the ballpark of what I mean by an assumption would be trying to distill some truths out of where you are now. And you might start your statement of an assumption with the phrase, I don't think anybody here would disagree that. And so what are some of the big findings or kind of foundational concepts that, given this landscape, you find yourself faced with or gifted with at this point? Martha?
I think everyone would agree that the transportation bond has accelerated the possibilities of urban renewal.
What do others think?
Yeah.
Absolutely. In our project, just to reinforce that concept, because that was on my top of my mind as well, but in our project cost projections that we'd done with Alpine, we were estimating $5.3 million to redo it, and other funding, we left zero. And so we've inherited $2.1 million in other funding that we didn't otherwise have in our plan. So that's obviously a significant impact on that, and provides, I think, a lot of opportunity to accelerate some growth in that area.
So any other assumptions?
I'd like to offer one that's really, it's personal to me. I don't know if it's shared by everyone, but for me, in urban renewal, an assumption should be that urban renewal, the purpose of urban renewal is not to finance public services that should be otherwise financed with other sources of funding, and using urban renewal money to subsidize city government. My view is that urban renewal should be used to enhance the community in terms of its own private development and the development of redevelopment of properties that are in need of that, primarily in the private sector, with the ultimate result of enhancing the tax base, which does ultimately help the city and all the other taxing interests. So to me, the example of Independence, which got itself into real trouble, was one of the examples of using urban renewal money to build a new city hall, which to me was kind of violating that assumption. And I think we had a lot of discussion with the council about that during the process of setting up the urban renewal district, but that's one of my assumptions going forward that I think is important.
What do other people think?
I agree.
Scott?
Sue, I have a unique opportunity to be on the advisory committee and also in city council, and I think Kevin really hit upon something that's, I think, really important, and that is we have so much trust from a council perspective to the advisory committee. We trust you. We look at each of you, and you are passionate, and you have experience, and you are the working arm of the council. And it was great, Kevin, that you shared what you shared, because I think, from my perspective on the council, we have trust. We're not working against one another. We are hand in glove. And I just wanted to share that goes both ways, and both entities know that. But to me, that's an assumption, and it's one to get out at the very beginning as we go through this process.
Great. Thanks, Scott.
You know, I think one for me, and I don't know if everybody will agree with this, but I think the majority of McMinnville citizens trust both in forming the urban renewal area, trust both the city and the advisory groups to do what is best for the long-term development of the city. Because I really do feel that the majority of the community does trust us, where it's not an issue that happened in Independence. They very little trust in their council of the way they formed their urban renewal area. So to me, I think that's very important. I do think we have the trust.
I think one of the reasons we have that trust is the amount of community involvement. At Doug's guidance and other committee members' guidance, we have a lot of different processes where the community can get involved. Maryland's a champion for that at times when we think we have great ideas, to not forget that we're representing a larger body. And I think we've done a good job, or at least a decent job, of doing that and gaining that trust, and not letting anybody's own agenda move anything forward that hasn't been through due process. So.
Yeah.
I'd just like to echo that. I think it is an assumption that we have the community's trust because we continually earn it, because we involve the community, and we operate under the assumption that as we move through the process, we'll continue to do that because we know how important it is.
Yeah.
There are no shortcuts.
No, there aren't.
And when we talk about independence, that was a shortcut, because if people know what was happening, they would have done that mission, hopefully.
Other thoughts along this line?
Well, I think one of the things we've talked a lot about all the way through this process is maintaining whatever we do with these plans and with this urban renewal money needs to support the true character of McMinnville. And so there's been a lot of discussion around that. And I think it goes along with really representing the citizens, not like a small faction of the citizens, but really representing what McMinnville is in the projects that are supported by this money, and even down to like the downtown McMinnville has a character, and this new granary district will have a character of its own, and we want it to tie together. So I think there's an assumption that we'll continue to refocus on that and make sure that we're like capturing that in what we do with this. There we go.
The way I would add to that is to say that the urban renewal process is an integrated process. It's the downtown character as related to the 5th Street corridor, as related to the Granary District, as related to the Gateway District. They're all complementary to one another, and it should be approached on an integrated basis as opposed to having competition between the Gateway District and the downtown. Each needs to see the benefit to the other of improvements made in both places.
And that's really part of the education process as well. And when you have two districts that will be different but connected, and maintaining the relationship that you have with, to me, Kelly represents the Granary District, and our board represents the downtown. Those relationships, though intangible, are really important to keep, and they are a value that we can't put a value on it. We really need to remember that that's what we're passing along as well.
One thing I've seen as a need, I guess I'm making an assumption. The assumption is that there needs to be the greatest possible coordination and collaboration and planning of utility interests. And I'm not saying there isn't. I'm just saying that we've seen in this process that it's challenging. You've got a water and light department. You've got city streets and sewer. You've got private utilities. There's transportation bond, and knowing who's going to do what, when, and having them happen at the right times and coordinating urban renewal with that is challenging because it's sometimes reactionary, as Kim can tell you, it's reactionary to what's going on, and not always easy to say, well, we're going to do this in this year and this in this year. So I hope that process is as continuous and collaborative as it can be. A lot of players in it.
Mike, one thing that fosters this, and it goes back to something you said, Jeb, is that, and others have said, not only do we have to foster and feed our existing partnerships, we have to look at every opportunity to create new partnerships where they're warranted and where they're needed. There may be partnerships out there that we've really never considered before that could help us tremendously. So we can't only foster what we have between the MDA and all the different, the MURIC and everything else we have, and the Granary District and the Northeast Gateway. We have to look at what other new partnerships are out there that we can grow and foster that we may never have thought about.
That brings up the question about private partnerships. And the meeting we had the other day got me thinking a lot about that, because both of the people we heard from had experiences with private partnerships to different ends. And it seemed to me the message I got out of that was private partnerships could be a really important part of what happens, but that they need to be creative but solid, and creative partnerships with private enterprise, if you're not used to dealing in that arena, can be thin ice for a governmental entity. And we saw for Sherwood, they didn't make the best deals all the time. But we saw in Albany, she said, you've got something to offer and you need to go to the table and get what you need. But she knew how to do it. So I just hope we move forward knowing we have something to offer. We need private partnerships. We go open-minded to the table to try to get what we need, but we do so in a smart way, knowing what we're doing, getting the help we need, and doing it right.
And
but
contracting
knowing
well.
we can do it.
Right.
Other thoughts? Foundational assumptions that will perhaps inform your discussion about the options.
Doug Lisser, and I don't know if it's really an assumption or not, it should be, but the assumption is, however we move forward in the next 5, 10, 20, 25 years, I think the assumption has to be made is, from an oversight and a implementation standpoint, we don't have the staff with the resources and education we have now to pull this off. I think Doug gives it more than I could ever imagine he could give it in his staff, but we don't have some of that staff that we're going to probably need to do what we need to do.
Well, we've seen those that have been very successful,
The Redmonds,
being
the
able to bring in
Madresses, yeah.
business development experts, a whole cadre of skills and abilities to a point where it really helps drive the process.
I think to reinforce his point is, something can work at a level where you've got a lot of people here that have been here for decades driving this process, and ultimately there's going to be changes and new people are going to come on board. I think any project of this type, is at risk from changes in leadership. Doug's not going to be here forever. He's got places he wants to go. So we have a pretty strong leadership and now in a lot of ways, not to say we couldn't pick up the ball where we need to, but I think having that key lynch person is something that will be needed at some point to kind of make sure that as people and counselors come and go and other community members come and go, that this process isn't stalled or misdirected, because this is a pretty powerful tool, and I think just the organization of it long term needs to be thought out on the front side, which we've done obviously some planning for that. So.
Yeah, and Elaine had even emphasized in that meeting how critical it is to have that core person like Kate was to be able to really carry it through.
To kind of reflect on another entity in McMinnville where we did this through economic development, Cassie, you were involved in that with me as well. In the foundation of it, we started out as a subcommittee of a chamber and worked into a partnership of community members that were interested from different positions, and ultimately worked toward an organization that could fund a person. And we saw that organization change, not overnight, but literally almost overnight, when we hired Jody Christensen. And so we went from being a very reactionary entity, covering the bases, so to speak, and doing things. But once we implemented that key person, that organization expanded greatly. I see this entity at some point in the future, I don't know how many years that is, having a key person that has dedicated time. Because we're going to identify projects, and we're going to find partnerships, and there's going to be a lot of work to do.
It would be nice to get some clarity from the council, though, as to whether you see this being purely the city, is it under planning, is it economic development, is it partly private? I don't know how you see this functioning at all.
I can tell you, and I'm only speaking for myself, but I think from an administrative overview compliance issue, if you take the cities that I know that have been successful, the Redmonds, the Madresses, the Pendletons, they found out they were successful by actually having the lead person was part of their city's planning or economic development staff, and then they were the key person that knew all the urban renewal stuff that actually then worked with all the groups because they had those skills. Because a lot of those skills overlap in several different areas.
Marilyn, we had an opportunity just to get back from our League of Cities conference and had an opportunity to go to, some of us to Madras and to Redmond, and go into the office, walk the city to see how critical that person is. Because what they're able to do is they're able to kind of the synergies of bringing knowledge, and there can be some grants. There's all kinds of things that we're not even utilizing today the way they ought to, and there's a group of individuals out there that I think are growing their expertise, and that's what we need to take a look at.
And if I could just add, and I think that's one of the discussion topics as we figure out what is the next steps that you should pursue. That will help educate us on when to get that higher. If it's more standard infrastructure road things, then we may be able to do more of that internal to the city. If it becomes more private partnerships, that's where I think if you let the city bureaucracy, how we think does not translate to a quality hire for that. That's why I would think that going out and really getting that individual to target it and really get that expertise would just be so valuable. But I think the timing on the hire will be very dependent on the how you tee up the projects.
Sure, understood.
And I would add to that I think that it will probably evolve.
Probably,
It
yes.
will probably evolve from infrastructure heavy at the outset, stimulated by the road bond, and will evolve towards the follow-up development projects that come about as a result of those infrastructure projects that require a lot more skill in the negotiation of development agreements with private investors and the kinds of controls and interactions that take place. And that probably also happens at the same time that the TIF revenues tend to start to gain ground and enable you to afford
That's probably very
the
true.
professional assistance, probably as that infrastructure leg tends to run its course during the first 5 to 7 years.
Well, we got some input at our meeting the other day from Albany at what level and when they felt they needed to do it. And I can't remember the gal from Albany, but she said she couldn't have done this without having that dedicated position and support. And then she had to even grow it.
And didn't she say that she came in at about $1 million? Yeah.
The other thing, just listening to the assumptions here, the input we got from the city of Sherwood was, to me, very illustrative of two assumptions. One, trust issue. There they had conflict between the Urban Renewal Board and the Advisory Committee, and that relationship was dysfunctional, wasn't effective. And second, they didn't have competent staff that were assigned to lead that process, and they ended up spinning their wheels as a result of that. So those were warnings that we were given last week that, to me, go straight to two of those very important aspects, which is staff and trust.
And the importance of getting your systems down before it ramps, like getting like we're talking about tonight, and the communication between the board, how you make decisions, all of the key processes that are going to be really critical as we ramp up, as we have more bigger projects. You don't want those systems of functioning to break down at that point. So these early years are so
Even
important.
something as simple as each little project, the very first project, you should get a report. There should be a standard report form that comes, this is what we did, this is what it cost, and every single thing we do, so that there is a process and a form. And
Well, we're starting to get into some of the things we're going to talk about later. So maybe we could hold a conversation here unless somebody's got another just one of those, I don't think anybody disagree, that you want to see as part of the record of the meeting and part of your guiding principles. Well, hearing none, let's get into the part of the meeting where we're looking at the alternatives. So, again, Walt, I think we're going to put you on the spot here. I hope this isn't the first minute you're hearing about this time.
Wing it, Walt.
Tell me it's not, Walt.
Well, I think it's no surprise that in the last 6 months, the road bond and the advent of the planning and engineering process that's come about through the city, not through MURAC, has focused the committee upon its first project under the plan as adopted. And that first project on the list of projects that I saw put up on the board here before the meeting was the Alpine project, and that was originally budgeted somewhere around $5 to $7 million, and was thought about as occurring in phases because the Urban Renewal District would not be able to fund all the project early on. However, in the process of setting up the Urban Renewal District, the consultant to the city, I think, voiced her opinion. She voiced it last week to me again, that the biggest potential that the Urban Renewal District has to see a result in the form of jobs and multiple use facilities and redevelopment of properties is in the Northeast Gateway area along the Alpine corridor, that anything that can be done to enhance that project will make it possible to generate revenues that make other projects more feasible sooner. And so it just adds oomph to your project. The committee, I think it's fair to say, has focused pretty much with the kind of a laser focus over the last 6 months on that project, as the consultants have come and met with us 2 or 3 or 4 times, and we've had community outreach meetings to go over concepts and design alternatives and so forth. But the issue that's going to come to the council fairly soon over the next few months is, does the council want to take and turn a 3-block project that's probably fundable through the road bond into a 4.5 or 5-block project that's fundable through the road bond and the urban renewal district? If that is seen as desirable, and I think the committee, at least at this juncture, views that it is desirable, then it will require looking at financial feasibility and at how much financing can the city and the urban renewal district generate within the next year, because construction really is a year off. So we're looking at not today, but a year from now, what can the urban renewal district do in terms of TIF revenues to help service debt. And so that I think that it's fair to say that the committee has voted informally several times to recommend to the council that the city do what it can to enhance the Alpine project and see what can be done to turn that from a 3 to a 5-block project, if at all possible. Second, I think that the committee is looking at and starting to receive information about 5th Street, because the 5th Street intertie with the Granary District is the route from downtown to Alpine Street. And it's a very critical project, and it's happening simultaneously in design with the Alpine Street project. It's not happening sequentially, it's happening simultaneously. It's the same engineering firm. So whether or not the urban renewal district should be also contributing to that project, because quite frankly the road bond probably will pay for streets and sidewalks and maybe some infrastructure underneath the street that needs redoing, but it probably won't pay for the frills like historic lighting and maybe benches and amenities that you want to encourage pedestrians to use 5th Street and make it a lovely street to transition from 3rd Street to the Granary District. So what level of support can the urban renewal district provide? I think the committee is interested in exploring that. We haven't had a chance to get into that. We haven't had any feedback yet from professional staff yet. We haven't seen a design yet for 5th Street, but I think that's coming in the coming months, and we're about to get into that. And so that's going to come to the council. So whether or not the city can figure out a way to finance $2 million as opposed to $1.5 in order to enhance the 5th Street project and maybe start something downtown at the same time, these are considerations that I think the committee is interested in exploring. And I think that the focus has been primarily on Alpine to this point, but I think the focus is beginning to broaden and to shift because we're kind of being forced by events to...
I'd almost take that past 5th and look at the entirety of the downtown improvements in the transportation bond, because a lot of that had urban renewal implications.
Correct.
To look at all of that and say, well, don't just say, oh, we don't have to pay that out of urban renewal now because it's in the transportation bond. Where might it be really appropriately augmented?
I think a couple of issues that Walt bring up, I think, are very valid. I've had everybody come to me, or a lot of people come to me and say, the 5th Street is an ideal intertie between the downtown area and the Granary District. I've also had people come to me and say 3rd Street to Irvine with the old railroad depot, with what's across the street, the potential of the 3rd and Galloway, that maybe it should just be an Elf all the way down to Irvine Street and then up past Elizabeth Chambers right in. So you're looking at Newcastle right at the gate, Granary District, and that should be. But I think those are the kind of design decisions, as we're talking about now, a transportation bond and about the urban renewal area and about the Northeast Gateway area. How does that really lay out? And I think that's going to be a tough decision because they both have their merit. They both have their merits. I think that's going to be a real tough decision.
Do any of the committee members want to make any other comments or add anything to that really concise overlay that Walt just gave?
Did you have more, Walt? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, please.
Okay, no, I just.
I'll talk too much.
I butted it on you, so.
Cassie?
Well, as you might guess, this is a big conversation for us too, is what is that? How will the traffic flow? What is the best pedestrian-friendly way to flow between the downtown and the Granary District? And I think that's yet to be seen, and I think you're exactly right, that we'll have to weigh both of those. But it's very exciting to think about people being able to walk between those two districts and know where they're going and know what they'll see, and that there will be very exciting things going on in both places.
Well, you even talk a little bit about the enhancement of Fifth Street becoming more of a thoroughfare. How do you get across Fifth Street from the downtown area if we've been real successful in making that a major thoroughfare? How do you get across? And right now, to get into the Granary District is a little hole. How do you know even where to go to get to the Granary? It's over that direction, and you're walking blocks around. And so the identity of how to get through, how to get from Third to the Granary District and to Alpine, given the fact that we're trying to alleviate some of that traffic off of Third to put on Fifth to equal, whether it be Second or Fifth or whatever it may be. We're trying to equalize a little bit of that downtown.
Yeah, one of the things that we talked about when we were having discussions with our initial design team that was we were looking at for the Alpine project is they were not the initial design team that was kind of slated for the Fifth Street. We made that argument that here we are going to create this thoroughfare and we're going to need to make this connection. And so they are fortunately working on both those projects to help make that, and I think they have some good ideas they're working on. Just to kind of talk a little bit, not beat transportation to death, but when I look at our project list, and 2 of the top 5 projects are both being partially funded through transportation funds, making that connection to 3rd Street has been, I think, aside from street improvements, has been the biggest challenge that we're trying to figure out how to make. The Granary District does not have a public right-of-way through it. There's, with the design of 5th Street, and our preliminary designs are on Mike Bissett's desk. I saw him today. There is some challenge there with not having a connection to Alpine, and I can tell you from personal experience in the Granary District development, that flow and that connection to and from downtown is going to be important for development, future development that we want to see in the Alpine, or that I think can happen in the Alpine District to generate tax increments. It also brings up the potential, and I think all this is being really accelerated more than we all probably even realize, but there's a lot of potential for these public-private partnerships, and the Granary District isn't outside of the realm of possibility of one of those, to make that connection. Scott, you mentioned that, our little alleyway that we throw, during Crush, we throw the fence up and scoop people over, and, there's design work that could be done around that we could work on to make some more permanent connections. And I think, monuments and signage and things and historical perspective to, so people do know kind of how to make that connection, whether it's down Irvine or some other street, I think are things that we should look at in urban renewal as alternative funding uses.
I think as mayor and representing the council, one of my fears, and this has always been a fear, I think what we're just really kind of on the edge of doing something really big, really something really important. But yet, if anybody that's traveled Lafayette Avenue knows what Lafayette Avenue is at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 4 o'clock, you're backed up to A Street. If we're not real careful, and that's why I think this is an ideal time to tie them together, do we take then, even though we have the best intentions, are we forcing a lot of the east-west traffic all the way back to 8th Street, especially the westbound, where A Street isn't designed to take that kind of traffic because it's a residential street, or are we forcing some back down to 3rd Street? Because we're making 5th Street now not serve up to what it does. And so I think when we look at the design of 5th Street and how it ties in with the urban renewal area and how it ties in, we have to expand that and look at, what are the effect it's going to have on the streets surround. We just put a lot of money into 8th Street. It won't take long to pull A Street apart with a lot of truck traffic and a lot of car traffic that it isn't carrying right now. So And how do we solve those residents, because that's strictly a residential area.
Before I ask Doug to come up and talk about the other projects that you have in your mix, does anybody want to make any other comments just about the Alpine Avenue project that Walt sketched out of there?
I had one more thought that when Kelly was talking, there really are, we focus a lot on pedestrian traffic and what the route is to get to Alpine for pedestrians. But when Kelly said there's really no public right-of-way through the Granary District, we really have to think about also how vehicles will naturally get there in a way that it makes it feel connected for somebody who wants to go to different parts of downtown in a vehicle and not on foot. And I'd never made that distinction until you said that, because even if we route the pedestrian route through that, kind of natural area, it doesn't make sense to route. It's not a public right-of-way. It doesn't make sense to have. So just really thinking about that too with regards to the projects that we do. It should be connected for somebody that's driving as well.
In the early designs and the early drawings of the area and some of those original ideas that were up, I remember really clearly that there was inclusion in the urban renewal district of very little green space, which I remember kind of saying, I think we should include more green space early on, but the one place where there was a lot of green space was in a conversation about trying to forge some sort of public-private partnership with the railroad and put a linear parkway along the railroad, which would accommodate both pedestrian and bike traffic and would allow for multiple points of entrance into the Granary District. And it's a statement and a question at the same time. Is that totally off the table as a point of conversation?
It's certainly not right now part of the Alpine Design Project, which is a road project, and is funded as such. But no, it's not off the table in terms of us talking about it, because it comes up repeatedly as one of those things that the Gateway Master Plan calls for.
Right.
That is a goal to make it livable and desirable for pedestrian and bike, and multiple use, not just business.
That's where the urban renewal dollars could come in, if we see that as being more of the gateway for the pedestrian coming down from 3rd Street, and we can make that safe and uplifted, and that could be, but we can't use the transportation funds to do that, as you said, because it's not the infrastructure of what we're trying to do with transportation.
One of the things I told a couple of committee members, Scott being one of them, when we were over in Bend, is, and I guess if we look at anything, if we look at the existing Alpine Avenue, and I think that is number one, that floats to the top. I'm really currently concerned, and this is more of a concern or a fear, it's not that it's warranted, I don't know, is that if we go from 7th to 10th Street, and given the current tenants along Alpine on the west side between 8th and 10th, and if we don't go to at least 12th Street or add 2 more blocks to it, we have a lot of property in there that, and Marilyn talked about the piecemeal. I don't know if it would happen in 2 years, 10 years, but I think if we have the money, I would like to at least see a couple extra blocks of Alpine Avenue done so we can get a bigger bang and get that to redevelop. Because currently there's not going to be a lot of redevelopment between 7th Street and 10th Street. There's not a lot to redevelop, so.
So let me, before we start to get into the pros and cons, Doug, am I putting you on the spot here? Yes, you are.
But we love to.
I certainly can't do it.
That's all right. Well, I probably should come up to this. Allow me. I think the conversation is right on point that I've heard so far tonight. I guess if I had any voice in this, I would say let's finish the conversation around the Alpine and Fifth Avenue project. Let's put that to bed. Let's let the transportation improvements work out. Let's take a time to review those and see how they're functioning. Come back and modify the little bits and pieces of those that don't work. What I would then do is suggest that we revisit the funding scheme that's in your current plan, see where there's opportunities to shift those funds, because we do have funds that are now not earmarked for any particular project. Let's find the next catalyst project. We have the north end of Alpine. We have a couple of vacant properties and developed properties that are on the market that would make, in my opinion, great private-public partnerships with the right vision, right people involved. And then finally, what I want to make sure that we always keep in mind is that we have enough reserve or capacity in our system, and that means staff and financing, to take care of the unanticipated opportunities that might come our way. Don't leverage or look everything that you have. Those would be my 3 pieces of advice, I guess, moving forward.
Yeah, case in point on his comment and Doug's comment about anticipating things. You don't know where the next opportunity is going to come from. As we all know, working with railroads can be quite difficult. But I think that vision for that pathway, and it's funny that you brought that up because I parked on the crossing this morning and looked at where the two spurs join into one, and then eventually down to kind of see what the width was there. But not to get too far off track. The McDaniel family tried to buy the Southern Pacific property that they were leasing, quite a big chunk actually of what is now the Granary District, for a couple generations, and couldn't do it. I just happened to fall in the picture at a time when Southern Pacific was getting rid of some land and getting ready to sell to Union Pacific, which we didn't know about at the time, and went to San Francisco, met with their property manager, and they sold me the property. And it was almost 2 acres worth of property that was being leased that wasn't owned. So having resources available for those opportunities, because you don't know when they're going to come, whether it's land acquisition, if you get a developer that comes in on a vacant parcel and says, here's our plan, here's our financing, they're willing to enter into a partnership. It might take some assistance. That's what we heard from Kate Portia down in Albany. So I think we need to keep that in mind and not just spend every last cent we've got to do one certain thing. We need to make sure we can, be ready for the opportunities that come, because they will.
You'd like to continue the conversation on the Alpine Avenue. So we heard that there was the project, as it's envisioned, is 3.5 blocks, yes?
We don't have the estimates yet. We believe it to be about 3 to 4 blocks.
3 to 4 blocks, okay. And then I heard Walt say that if it expanded to a 5-block project.
Or 6 blocks.
Is that right, or 6?
Yeah, I would guess right now that funding would probably be closer to 3. That's what the transportation plan called for, was about 1/3 of the entire 9 blocks, and so what I talked about was really using urban renewal funds to try at least design it and bid it out for 5 blocks and see what happens, and then because you never know, it may be cost effective, it may be not cost effective. At that point, you might do the last 2 blocks as an alternate additive in the bid. Right, with urban renewal money being the kind of the wild card. So yes, I in my own mind's eye, I vision it a 5-block project as opposed to a 3-block project if it's feasible and possible, without forestalling all other options, that you might want to be undertaking at the same time.
So would you describe that as the direction that the committee's been taking? That's kind of the place where you've ended up, maybe not the direction you've taken, but where you are in your thinking
I
today.
think that's a fair statement.
Yeah, I think our common sense assumption here that the committee's been working on is that if they're already doing this project and they're already, we've already got design teams and so many things that you would have to just go out and re-engage to start this process. If we could tag on a couple more blocks to that, we haven't bid it out. We don't know, but there's got to be, common sense would say there's got to be some savings to be had there. I mean, this group is looking for leverage. We're looking to leverage resources that we've got, and this might be an opportunity to extend those infrastructure improvements a little bit further at a time when we've got some resources. And I think that's the assumption that the committee has been working towards in making that a priority for our group, and ultimately working with City Council or with the board. So,
just to be clear, Walt, when you say 2 more blocks, do you mean from there's blocks and there's blocks there. You know, there's really 6 blocks by numbered streets total. So 10th to 11th, is that the 2 blocks you're talking about? It's a big, you know,
And there's 11th Street,
I mean,
11th.
basically, you got 7th to 8th, 7th to 10th.
15th.
7th, 8th, and 9th are the 3 blocks. 10th and 11th are the 4th and 5th blocks
Whereas
that you'd be talking about.
From 7th to 8th to 9th
Right.
is 2 blocks. To 10th is 3.
Right.
To 11th would be 4.
And there's 11th and 11th Avenue, which is where we walk down to, which is 5.
Okay, so, yeah, I mean, that 10th to 11th is really twice as far as from 9th to 10th.
Yes.
Right,
Just-
'cause
I guess
I don't need to say
I
that
think
now,
that the
just-
mayor made a very good point, and that is that if you look at at the Alpine area, the most developable property is not in the first 2 or 3 blocks. It's in blocks 4 and 5. And so you miss an opportunity if you don't take it that far, if you can, at the outset, because that's where some of the partnerships may come in, is along that improved right-of-way.
And the way, Jeb, the reason I looked at, because 11th Way, which is actually the 5th block, is the natural breaking point where Lafayette Avenue connects to Alpine Street from 10th Street. 11th Way is the next, so if it went to 11th Way, we're stopping at a natural breaking.
Let me ask this then, because if you go with that assumption, and the desire is to first off use the first bond money or with the loan money or whichever, however we're going to do it, to extend 2 blocks, is there anything left to discuss after that, Doug?
We haven't run the numbers, to be honest with you, at this point. We don't have engineer estimates, for example, in design, so we don't have a base to even make that.
Any thoughts in roundabout world?
Roundabout world, the last estimate was about $7 million for the entire project.
Okay.
This is 2.1. So half would probably get us there about 3 blocks. It really depends, again, when we start adding amenities and ornaments to the tree on this design too. If we were just doing a standard street section, that's one cost. We're doing a different design, a little bit out of the box. So we don't have great numbers at this point. We may have some as early as tomorrow. We're going to be meeting with the consultants tomorrow afternoon on some 30% drawings. So that might get closer. I guess that's my circle back. That's the point I was trying to make. My first point is let's close up this conversation on Alpine Avenue, get direction from the Urban Renewal Agency Board, the council, and then we'll have direction as to how to proceed. And along that path, there are benchmarks or stop and go points on that path.
But the first, completing those 2 blocks, you said it was between $1 million and $2 million, rough estimate?
Total project 7, what we have in the transportation bond is about 2.1.
So add another 2 rough about?
Another 2 would, yeah.
So for a while, that would be the first, that will be your monies that go into urban renewal. And so it does give some more decision space for those other things if you so choose.
Yeah, I haven't looked at my amortization table to see what 1.5 million over 20 years and what the payment is. I mean, that's way beyond my usual.
Marcia's got it figured out already.
Well, I have looked at that, and it's about 110,000.
Yeah,
So.
and we got 5 million for 435.
Yeah, and so it really depends on how much you borrow at the outset, and of course, when you look at the transportation budget, the actual construction budget for 3 blocks was 1.7 million. You're going to have some augmented expenses for additional engineering and some of the additional augmentation of just the street. So the question of whether you would spend another $1 million or whether you'd spend another $1.5 million or $2 million will depend on, well, okay, how much financing do you want to try and go out for at your first phase, or do you do it in chunks, and if so, how much can you do a year from now? Right now, you could probably do $1.5 million at 4%.
And Walt, you know, we've been looking at those first couple of blocks as festival with very unique pieces to it. As we go down
Next 2 blocks are the craftsmen.
Right, and so that may look a little different. So maybe $1 million will get us there, which maybe leaves us $500,000 for 5th and 3rd, having a little projects.
Consultants have to weigh in on that.
Hey, Doug, is the number that you got for the full street, just the typical street?
No,
It's for the festival, like,
right, it was a number provided by Murray Smith and Associates.
okay, good,
That would help set up the amount for the bond measure.
okay.
So let me see if I understand where the committee's ended up. It is that there's potential economies of scale and there's some more weighty public-private partnership opportunities if we go that additional increment past just those first 2 or 3 blocks on Alpine Avenue. But we understand that we'll have to estimate the funds available and understand the city's appetite for risk, I guess, it would be.
And I would say our appetite. There's going to have to be things that it's going to have to be kind of a lock. You can only do so much at the beginning because you only got so much money. So parking, maybe not. What is it that's got to be up front, because we won't be able to do all of them for a rather. We'll get to them, but it's going to take a while.
Yeah.
It's going to take years.
Okay, so then I can amend
The
that.
patience part.
I could amend that, then there would have to be some deferred gratification on.
That's a great way to
It's in the,
Other projects.
it's really in the nature of urban renewal.
As they said, patience, patience.
Patience,
More
patience,
patience,
patience.
So, council, other council members, what are your thoughts? And I think we've heard the case for the longer Alpine Avenue project. Do council members have a case in their mind for another alternative?
No, I support that. I think if we can leverage the bond money to do more there, I think that'll just speed up the development over there and make our tax increment financing dollars come in quicker. I fear that if we don't take advantage of this, that there will be this undeveloped section that, especially when it comes to the infrastructure part of it, that could take a greater amount of time to get us to the point where we're actually seeing an increase in taxable improvements to that area. So I'm definitely supportive of, if it's feasible, to go as far as we possibly can and to make those investments now.
Larry, what's your take? I mean, you don't have to wait. I'm not asking council members to weigh in about how they would vote on this at some date in the future, but just taking your pulse on this right now.
Could I just add also, I completely in agreement with what Remy said about there needs to be a priority set for the foot traffic from point A to point B. I think not doing that could get us in, without having that idea as a priority, could really get us in trouble. Otherwise, people are going to feel unsafe to make that transition across Fifth Street over the tracks and along Lafayette Avenue. They're going to want to drive from point A to point B, and that is just not a feasible option. We're going to get ourselves into a lot of trouble unless we come up with a solution for this foot traffic, a viable solution there. I think a lot hinges on that, and I'm a little nervous that we don't have a really good plan for that right now, because we could design both sections beautifully without having that bridge. We could cause ourselves a lot of trouble. Sorry, go ahead.
No problem. Well, I think the committee has done a fantastic job of weighing all the alternatives, and I think that, utilizing the funds properly is key. But the thought that goes through my mind in this extension of Alpine and the utilities is, if we want to develop some public-private working agreements, we've got to somehow make it attractive to the private sector. And if there's no utilities, if we don't know when the future the utilities are, who wants to establish a private venture there if they don't know if they're going to have proper facilities and all that in order to run their business or whatever development they want to put in there to its full maximum capacity. So there's that part of it that goes through my mind is, how far do we go And what are the possibilities of implementing new businesses, structures, or whatever into that Alpine street? And what do they need to do that? And we need to somehow make it attractive for them so they come.
Mr. Mayor, any thoughts?
I think my thoughts, I've already given what a lot of my thoughts are. As far as we can extend it based on the financing, whether it's 1 block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks, whatever it shows that we can do, that's, we should take on as much of it as we possibly can.
Now, speaking of the reserve, then with that, how much do you want left in this reserve? How much opportunity money do you want to have?
To me, that's hard to tell because without knowing 3 blocks or 5 blocks, we may look at it and say that's too much. We're not going to do any of it. But to me, it's hard to tell, not knowing what all the other things we might want to keep in there. Is it 10% of the total? Is it a dollar amount of the total? Is it 20% of the total? I guess I'd have to have more figures on what that whole extension would cost before I can make a good guess of how much we want left.
Well, let me ask you this, in priorities again, how important is having that opportunity money? Does Alpine drive everything and the opportunity money only comes after the extension? How important is opportunity money to you?
I mean, there has to be some amount
Some
of
opportunity,
opportunity
but
money.
how much?
And can that opportunity money be sort of remaining increment, remaining tax increment financing amount? I mean, if there's so much tax increment financing that is available for opportunity, can that be converted into a loan at that level? So, I mean, let's say that there's $30,000 a year. Could you then borrow on that $30,000 a year level? Because that's the remaining tax increment financing for an opportunity.
And that would be based on how much, like I said, how much debt you want, how much ability you want to be able to pay in.
Right.
And I'd have to ask those who've done urban renewal before, when you do public-private partnerships is where I think opportunity money plays out the most. When you're offering, I don't know how those structures work, if bringing debt into that is as equal as cash. I would assume it would be. But that may be something we need to take a look at on how other urban renewal projects, now that they've matured and happened, how they did that when they did those public-private. Was it some kind of debt leverage, or was it some kind of direct money inject?
I don't know. That'd be good to know, though.
Yeah.
On
In
recent
Albany, we talked
projects,
about
'cause it
loans that
became-
were paid back or forgiven depending upon certain parameters, and so that
And
would
obviously,
be
that takes cash in up front.
And that's the cash up front piece,
Yeah.
you give loans out.
The way I view this is that every year that this plan goes on, you're gaining another 100,000 or more of additional TIF every single year. That, to me, is the opportunity money.
Yeah.
In the early years, you're going to do what you can to kind of stimulate the process and use what you have available to kind of kickstart it if you can. But as you go by, each additional year, you're getting another charge of additional funding. And so whether you set aside 50% of that or 60% of that or 20% of that, that's a policy decision for the council ultimately to make. But I view it as it's a snowball that naturally rolls downhill faster and faster, but you can make it roll faster if you invest strategically at the outset. So.
Yeah.
So that's an assumption. What do other people think about that? I mean, is that a philosophy that others are comfortable with?
Yeah, back to the mayor's point about the opportunities for private investment, and others have made the point as well. If we are strategic and we extend it to a point where it makes those properties that have the biggest possibility of increasing our tax base, then the amount that we get every year, if that does encourage private investment, then it's going to only help us going forward with getting more revenue.
I'd make a suggestion the council may want to look at some things that Albany and some others have done, and that is before you put in all your infrastructure and pay a lot of money, spend some time in getting actual developers involved and what they would request for a certain development and a size, and try to go up front and accommodate that public improvement to what they're requesting to locate.
Oh, if you can do that, you're miles ahead, aren't you?
There's a base format laid out within the Northeast Gateway in the zoning overlay that we did with the Northeast Gateway project that has designated uses for different, as you move down Northeast Gateway, there's different design uses, not that someone couldn't apply for a variance, but there's definitely things to consider just within that structure as far as how the infrastructure serves those and what the new uses could be based upon that zoning overlay with the Northeast Gateway. So I think maybe reviewing that isn't a bad idea as well, to kind of give us an idea of what we were pushing towards or trying to lead and guide to. So
I appreciate that the suggestion, the advice is to make the most out of the funds that are available, and I'd say generally I support that 100%. I feel like part of the decision or part of the conversation, though, there's a little cart before the horse. When I came to council meetings initially to watch the council and listen to council, Kevin, you would always talk about parking, and I always thought, God, that guy just talks about parking all the time. It's just ridiculous. He always brings up parking. But I have since come to understand the value of that conversation, and so not to be redundant with the pedestrian pathway or the parking, but in a way for me, seeing what some of the plan or some of the conversation is about how parking will be addressed almost dictates whether or not the consideration should be made to continue to expand the street improvements, because if that parking has not been accounted for, if there is no place for that to take place, then I agree that we could get into a pretty sticky spot, and it would be sad not to have said opportunity money because it was tied up. And then I think some of the realities that also we need to kind of talk about the tie-in with that are some of the existing structures, existing buildings, and existing land prices. So that empty lot that sits between 8th and 10th there, or I guess technically 9th and 10th, but yeah, 9th and 10th. I believe that is the asking price on that is about $350,000 right now, and I do not believe there are any utilities available there. I could be wrong about that.
That's for both lots, isn't it, Scott?
yeah, that's two lots. There is a current alleyway down the middle that with prior ownership of the adjacent lots was not possible to vacate. That there was a recent change in ownership in one of the structures that may not be as difficult to do, but there was two separate developable lots with very definite city-owned alley in between. So
That isn't actually platted as, in the Oak Park edition, as 9th Street?
9th Street, yeah.
So I think that that needs to be a real consideration. We have clearly manufacturers down there, but one of them, the major ones, and a large employer for our city is R&B Rubber, which has a high volume of employees, which requires a lot of parking, and also has a high volume of traffic, of truck traffic, which I think is a real consideration. I feel like I should say, just to disclose, that my business is a neighbor of R&B, and so in no way am I bringing this up in any negative or in any in it, and I'm not bringing it up on a personal or a personal business way at all, but in more as an observer of the heavy truck traffic that does come down that street on a regular basis, that comes off of Lafayette, that uses Alpine, that sometimes blocks Alpine. I'm sure you see that as well.
Yeah, we had a lot of discussion with that in our design meetings with the traffic engineers about the truck traffic and how it gets not only RB rubber but to the Grenier District as well, and how that Alpine is used. RB actually crosses Alpine more than they use Alpine, I think, when they come in on 10th, and then they exit actually out onto 8th Street at the Grenier District. One of the things that you brought up, though, I think is important just to say for the record, is that it brings up a good opportunity to talk about the tie-in and relationship with economic development. Having a large employer, industrial employer, in this urban renewal area, some of the things that we're talking about designing are looking out quite a few years, and in no way does it meant to displace any current employer. As a matter of fact, the street design would actually allow for existing types of parking uses where people are, it's a curbless design without sidewalks, so you actually have people parking perpendicular, which RB uses that quite frequently. And so one of their concerns is what we're doing and how we're doing, and it's part of the educating of the public and private sector that some of the design things we're doing actually are to benefit them and how they're utilizing that and not eliminate that type of parking and use. So, but I think it brings up a good opportunity because we're in constant contact with that employer because we don't want to lose them out of McMinnville. We don't want them to feel crowded out because we're looking out 20 years from now and that they continue to grow. They're obviously out of space as it is. What can we do? What can we do about that?
Sure, and so with that in mind, and I'm very glad to hear that that's part of the plan. So even with that, then where would anybody else park?
What's that?
So even with that,
where would anybody else park?
Yeah, exactly.
Any new development's going to have
full
parking requirements, so that's going to have to be within the footprint of the existing. Now, does that mean if someone came up with a large project, they wouldn't? There's always the opportunity for them to come back and say to the Urban Renewal District, hey, we want to make this, $15 million investment in this property. The land that's available doesn't have enough parking. Is there other land available? Could urban renewal funds be leveraged to help provide parking for the area? Some discussion like that's theoretical, but could happen. But certainly the parking requirements, there's not a zero parking requirement like there is downtown within the Northeast Gateway project. So I would foresee that any future development, they're going to have their own parking requirements.
Originally, there was conversation about parking requirements also being behind the buildings, so to speak.
Off street, off street behind. Alpine would have street front development, zero lot line on the front. So some of the design work for future development there. Yeah. So.
Can I ask a question about? I think it's a general consensus that urban renewal money should augment the transportation Alpine development. Are we rushing urban renewal because we have to meet the deadline of the transportation Alpine project, or can the transportation Alpine project be, if necessary, pulled back a piece of time to allow for the planning and the financial? I'm not necessarily a proponent of that. I'm saying it's not built in stone that has to be done, but
I would think we have design architects going underway.
Right.
That is the plan. We would have to stop, restart something else.
No, I mean the actual
Yeah,
not
construction isn't
that
started.
you'd stop doing that. I just wonder whether or not there's any additional time, whether we have enough time to do all the planning that's necessary to do the Alpine expansion correctly, and et cetera.
It's programmed for construction in 2016 and 2017, so it's a year away in terms of construction.
But
the original urban renewal plan, the urban renewal plan.
Construction bids already.
The design review has been bid and left.
Yeah.
That's already done in another way.
Yeah. Oh, the engine.
Something that we can't do.
As you're aware, the engineering's underway, and it's going to move into final design, I think, pretty soon. It's my guess, Doug. If they're at 30%, they're already moving into it. So.
I'm talking about construction.
It's not we can't, it's just that things have been, nothing is impossible.
Right.
Well, the other thing I would say, Jeff, in that regard, is that the urban renewal plan envisioned Alpine Street starting in 2016, it's actually tracking with the plan in terms of timing. Now, I don't feel rushed in the process. I think the process has been pretty deliberate so far, and it's really ultimately for the council to be comfortable with whatever the consultants ultimately design. But that process seems to be moving forward kind of in a very systematic fashion to me.
But isn't all of this part of what we talked about earlier, now that we've got the transportation money in there, of going back and reviewing the projects to make sure which ones we need to be tracking with again?
Right.
Because it's a moving target.
Right. And certainly the urban renewal plan review has to not get left behind by the road bond projects, so that you fail to have an opportunity that you would otherwise wanted to take advantage of.
Scott, we've heard from the rest of the council on this. You play kind of a hybrid role here. So did you want to weigh in at all just on the status of your thinking at this point?
I think my comments have been pretty in line with the advisory committee. We've been a part of that. We're feeling probably a little more comfort than the council, because we've been immersed in this, where there for a while we were almost meeting on a weekly basis with the design, and so we're feeling really good. I think it gets to that same point, though. We need to see cost, and then when we take a look at those costs and we look at the stream of dollars, then we make a determination where we feel the comfort. But I'm proactive to be moving forward just along with everyone else.
So I think we're going to need a break here in a minute, but I think if I could summarize what I think I've heard is that there's agreement that the case for the extended Alpine Avenue project makes sense. The case makes sense. However, it is likely to or will defer opportunity in other areas. But investment made strategically up front will make the snowball run downhill faster. And I've also heard a lot of concern about getting the horse of really, or the cart of really exciting, interest-driving projects too far out ahead of the ability to get people and vehicles safely to and from and parked and all that. So there's some infrastructure pieces that can't get too far out of the timeline. And I think what I've heard is council's remarks is this all is sounding good, but we've got factors of cost, how the money will flow in, time and optimum sequencing of events, flow among the districts, debt and risk appetite, parking. There's alchemy, there's a bunch of balls that have to get in the air, and we want to see what they all look like when they're all being juggled together. What's that optimum juggling act we can do among the factors? I think that's kind of what I've netted out.
You made a good comment. If I was to shorten anything and give up on anything on Alpine Street, and this is just my opinion, I think the opportunity cost, I would give up a block or so of whatever of Alpine Street, and this is from my speaking as mayor, because I've always thought the last 10 years, we achieved downtown exactly what we wanted to. We wanted a vibrant downtown area, and we've done it. But as part of that, to attract those businesses downtown, we kind of slacked off on our off-street parking requirements. Mm-hmm. So that was bad enough. Now we have a lot of people come back downtown, no place to park, and then I think it was 26 general parking spots. We've lost downtown now due to ADA requirements, which, yeah, they're used for ADA, but there's a lot of times you walk down Main Street or 2nd Street or side streets, they're not used at all. Mm-hmm. So technically, to me, that rushes the opportunity, or what we need to do with parking. For 26 spots from the railroad tracks to Baker Street is a lot of spots. That we haven't given up 100%, but we've given up quite a bit of it, because if they're not used for handicap parking, they can't be used at all. To me, so I think we have, like Mark said, I think one opportunity cost we have to look at as part of our transportation, or urban renewal, I should say, is addressing the parking. We just don't have it, period. And it's starting to get pushed out further into residential developments and further into residential developments where you're going, and this is a problem I have with especially with what we do with Alpine. I think now you're even starting to see trucks that are coming off of A Street off RB Rubber who are not going to Lafayette Avenue because of the time it takes to get onto Lafayette Avenue. They're taking a right and going down all the way down A Street to Baker Street. That's tearing up a street we just redid. What do you tell those residents that live in a residential neighborhood that have trucks going by them all the time? I don't know. So I think the parking issue is a big, and in Remy's area too, I think the parking issue is a big issue. So.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess to summarize it even shorter than this, I guess what I heard is this, Rick, you said it, this would be, if I was going to, say go on something, it would probably be that additional increment but on Alpine Avenue, but we need to understand it within the context of everything else. And I don't know how much of a plan update or how much of a consultant lift that is, Doug. I mean, how long does it take to net out, to really understand the implications in all of those dimensions? Cost and revenue and parking and transition among districts. I mean, how long, what's the time frame on really understanding the context for making the decision?
It's a topic of a conversation we'll have to have outside of this meeting tonight for sure. That'll be part of our continuing dialogue. I don't have an answer for you tonight. It's not a small task. It'll take resources. So we've got great minds at this table. I think we'll help with that conversation. If that's the direction of the council, that's what we'll
Doug, for my own awareness, when in the project, because we're going to have about 2 years where we already have, construction going on Alpine. Any idea when in that process we start losing some of the synergies of being able to add on to Alpine? Just to give, is our decision window here a year, 18 months, 24 months? Any wild wag?
Wild wag is that I don't know that it's time sensitive, to be honest.
Okay.
I think what we're trying to do now is capitalize on the economy of scale that we have going with an engineer in contract. That's the benefit to going now, immediate benefit. I don't know that we could sit here today with some candor say that it's going to create this much additional bump in tax income revenue with one more block or two more blocks. That analysis hasn't been done, and frankly, I'm not sure we should be spending a lot of money on that to get that kind of information.
No, I'm just wondering, when do we lose the option to, when they combine the engineering, when they do those things in the planning stages where we can save money because, they're already doing it for the first part of Alpine. It would just be a simple, it'd be a monies because they would also just look, they're already there, they would start to looking at the extension.
Doug, maybe we just pose that question to our group tomorrow.
Yeah.
We've got the team.
They're not far from that point.
Staff's booked out for 5 years and it's current plan. I remember this or Hill Road, Old Sheridan Road, First and Second Street, that was big public, the paving project in the summer. And this project, Alpine, will be breaking ground in the spring of this coming year.
Yeah, they need to know fairly soon if they're
I think,
designing 3 to 5 blocks.
the last timeline they proposed was construction starting in July.
Yeah.
So that speaks to your timeline a little bit.
So let's take a break. Let's do 10 minutes, so we'll be back at
The 13th.
after.
And
I've
then
got
start construction a year
10
later.
after 8 on my clock, everybody else. And then let's just close this conversation
I'd
out
like to
and
see
talk
this with
about
the 86 that the tax
council
starts.
committee interaction and
Doug
expectations
says
going
it's
forward.
really 86. I don't know how that affects. There's, so this is, this is the new increment each year from here. It's just a nominal compared to that, and I have no idea. It's interesting that 2017 increment goes up 11 million versus, and then drops back down. Tax increment. This is the amount of tax increment financing increases each year, opposed to the
intermeeting is also publicized.
And then I just said, well, this
There are
is,
certain things.
this is if all the property on the
Those
interest is
things are
3%.
minor issues.
Versus guarantee.
We try to do so each year.
So if it goes up that 3%, yes, assessed value.
And that's what we depend on.
Regularly?
Yeah, regularly. So then, what we try to do,
Just pass that along. You know, just numbers, but.
or like if we have a work session like this normally,
But this is what you
and
gotta
I don't know what's normally,
With confidence.
we would not have this. We would have had.
Right, that's when you say it. Pass it along. I mean,
can start
I think this is relatively conservative.
But now let's say we'll be here till,
Yeah, so this thing
I don't know, I
becomes
have
all of a sudden, I mean, it's really, the city
we were
could
thinking,
own
I
the
was thinking,
difference
as
for
I
a
looked
few
at the
years.
agenda and everything, but we were talking about.
I mean, if these actually happen.
So we said, okay, we start at 6, it was at 7:30, city start council.
Something dramatic.
Martha.
Right, and yes, and so you have to, but you have to have some faith in the system. But anyway, I think that I'd be curious, you know, what's the additional cost to engineer the whole thing?
Technically,
And then, does that mean, you know, that you lose a lot,
But it was,
but if you don't start building, you lose maybe.
that way, since this is a work session doesn't have noticed paper because it's not an official council.
You gotta pay it someday anyway.
It doesn't, it's not like a
But maybe
planning
you do
commission
it then after experience and,
or
you
a
know.
council where it has to be noticed in the paper and sent to some people. But this should have actually been long enough and critical enough. It should have been, because to me, I see a lot of things that are putting up there that are really just kind of spinning. We're trying to balance tonight, I think we're trying to way match the committee.
And that's
Great job, but now you have the council.
what they want to do. That's what
And a lot of these decisions.
No. The
Takes
people who are going to release it,
very simple.
they still. Right, they can. Sure, yeah.
Well, there's.
It is.
Then just engineering, you can engineer a third to 13.
And the eventual one has a rate where
I mean,
so,
and then,
The only thing is, if you decide to get this far down and then
That there's a big need. We're gonna go right.
If I put it on this side.
so you can overdesign
Am I-
this and then get your.
yeah, there.
We can't put it in.
It's amazing.
Break the fences.
But that was when I was down
Because the Federal Railway.
I was surprised about the permeation.
Yeah.
Once it's basically.
Well, so
And sometimes
that
not.
will be
Since the trust is
interesting.
Kind of what I'm hearing is they want to go forward.
They're closing. They're retiring.
They're retired.
Right, and their daughter
So
wants to.
we had working.
It sounds like we could do about 1
5 more opportunities.
That's what she said.
So about $8 million to what they call a fish.
Got that location.
but the 5 million was
So
not.
for a long time, I was hearing about my neighborhood changing for my dad on Concrete Road. And then I just never heard anything else.
Well, it's kind of up and down and up and down, and the latest is,
One thing I would caution.
and I forget the gentleman's and his wife's name, they kind of spearheading it. Talking with the nursery, and I think they've got the most to save on utility bills.
No, he's, this is,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah,
what he's
they're
saying.
huge.
A couple of those farmers.
So kind of
Right.
the balls with them,
Right.
you know?
Well, the interesting thing is,
Yeah, it's
well,
not
we're
dead
for
yet.
it.
Yeah.
Good.
Total assessed value.
We're for it. Find something else to me.
No, there.
No, this is from.
And nobody ever knew it was
This assessed value.
17 to 20.
If you look at these numbers here, they're going
It's
up
been- they
by
dug down
6%,
30 feet,
7%,
found some
4 and 5% per year.
Some old church.
That's why I
think
said,
they were
okay, if
part of
it
a
only went up
steeple.
3%, that's what it would
Basically
be.
nothing.
And so there has to be this much
It's been in
additional.
farming for like 70 years. There's no historic significance to that piece of property at all.
But I
That's
guess
state
my question
historic
is, do you
preservation. Sorry,
do we need
Bill, sorry, you can't.
We would like to
We having fun tonight?
explore the possibility on our building on 3rd Street of moving some wires so that cross a neighbor's property
Guarantee you
line
probably won't start till 9:50.
who has been difficult in getting it all on our property.
Project, so
Who do I call? Come out and unlock the big electrical box on our building so friends can take a look in there and see if we've got enough capacity. And can tell me whether I can run a line far enough across my parking lot to a pole to get there. So those are only two questions. Do we have capacity and can I run a line far enough? Who should I call to do that?
Probably the best one, maybe to call is Ryan Tim.
Ryan?
Ryan Tim. And if he happens to be out or doesn't get back to you, it's called John Dietz.
And then when you bid it out, you're gonna find out he's an affordable.
But Ryan does that kind of stuff quite a bit.
Okay.
But that doesn't have to happen to you.
So is it going across your neighbor's property?
It goes across the theater. It goes from, it services that little building on 3rd Street called Found Objects.
I know, I am.
Which is, we own, but it's next to our big building. And then it goes up and it hangs across the theater. Actually, the whole 2nd Street. And it does that because many years ago, you got tired of going with the basement Found Objects. Said, why don't we take it and put it over on 2nd Street, which sounded like a good idea. But our neighbor is just a difficult person and wants it off of that building and threatens to, in his words, just cut it.
Yeah, the downtown area is a difficult one with all the location of the meter sockets.
It's really hard, I know.
That's why we changed everything to remote read on electric, just because it took us half a day just to get the keys.
Just to get in it, I know.
Go into
Yeah,
basements.
and then, you never know the hours and.
You don't know who you'll run into.
You don't. I completely understand why you did it. But you didn't point out that when you did it, now, that long cord was the responsibility of the owner to take care of. But and that's not going to be a problem, except that this guy keeps threatening to cut the cord.
I do too.
And so far, he hasn't done it. But we would like to, we can move it to the next telephone pole down the way, because then everybody would be happy.
Well, you know,
Is it the
neither
plan?
Aussie nor I wrote our headline tonight.
Get oh, what is it? Am I going to be any new trees upset by it?
Well, it's true.
What is it?
It just says Space Museum Water Park up.
That's sound, that's always.
Which is true, it's scheduled for sale.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Just like it is. You did the right thing to come and tell me that you didn't write it.
I know, I wanted you to know. I saw Aussie there, I went,
Well, I'm just glad we sent the email around to everybody. We had a heads up anyway.
yeah. Well, it had to,
Yeah.
we couldn't, it was announced at meetings.
And you have to remember that this was written before the translation bond, so it moved Fish Street right up there.
Well, it is scheduled. It did.
I don't know whether it be things you guys are talking about, but I'm just telling you what I'm running into.
You're right, I know, I had somebody else that said the same thing, and that's why I tell you what it tells me. That's why I came to tell you.
Well, it's not true, is it? At 5th, right?
I'm not sure. It'd be a tough distinction, but it's,
Well, legally, it's not for
How
sale.
soon
I know about
After, I can't remember when it's at the time.
It's not for sale.
Is it gonna be like 3 or 4 years?
So, Marilyn, don't ask him for a correction, because then it goes across the front page again. Correction, not technically for sale, but
you don't know how many people
You're
I tell
right.
that. You know, people will talk, ask for a correction, and they'll say, absolutely, we'll put that in. Sure you want us to? Because everybody that missed the first one.
Is it on the registry?
No,
Yeah.
I know you have.
That's better for you.
Anyway, it's
Then it's not just,
it's not gonna, there's not gonna be a sale.
Did you know that there's a nationally recognized program for
know that, and that's why.
We can't lose what there's not gonna be. That's what we lose.
But everybody
come
is
next
gonna
week.
think there's gonna be a sale, the gavel's gonna come down.
So Marilyn, that'll be in a couple of weeks. Flash, not for sale, typically.
But everybody's gonna think it's actually gonna be up for sale, and it will never happen. It will never happen, right?
But we can't report why.
She's always wanted to do that.
That's why I envisioned.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Sue's voting.
Don't ever
Thinking of it.
read.
Connection.
They made me do it.
I'm having to sign my
All right, we can shoot it back up here.
the street designer. How can I Yeah. Yeah. That's why I wanted one group to be doing Wall Street.
I guess we're done.
Right, because it's all about me.
Batteries, but.
It's just, is it just related? Okay. Right, but what about Pavlov? I can't do it without my light on.
So I didn't mean to put words into council's mouth trying to summarize where we ended up. So just as feedback to the committee, I think council's heard where they're coming from. And obviously, this isn't a decision-making meeting, but do council members have any questions you want to ask the committee, or anything you want to add just in terms of giving feedback on what you've heard? And to bring this back, this particular page back, these are some summary points from what I've heard in terms of feedback.
I'd like to clarify and just make sure that I'm kind of on the same page. You know, as we've talked to the engineers and the architects, you know, we talk about parking a little bit, but they envision this being a much more walking area. That's the intent in the long run, for this to be, we have to provide transportation for automobiles and trucks. I mean, it's a mixed-use street. But their vision for this is a lot more walking, and kind of that's the festival and walking to this as a destination, as a part of the experience that you have in McMinnville. And I don't know that in some of the conversations, everybody was so concerned about traffic, but they tried to help ease us into that this is intended to be a different area than the typical street that we would see in McMinnville. So, you know, those are just words, okay? But again, they were at least able to ease our minds a little bit of what is trying to be created and show us examples of other areas that have been very successful in accomplishing that. So I thought I'd throw that
Yeah,
out.
Scott, I think that's a good point, and I will kind of address what my feelings on that is. I think you're exactly right. All the development we looked at, it is meant to be a walking area with a few parking for loading, unloading. But my concern is the people that are gonna walk that area, whether they're from out of town or wherever, they're gonna have to park someplace in order to walk that area. Where do they park in order to walk that area? And that's my concern. Are they gonna bleed over into the residential neighborhoods? You know, so where are they gonna park? And so I think from a parking perspective, I think that was my feeling, that, yes, I think everybody will agree that it is a festival-type street. It's mainly for a walking experience, but those people have to park someplace to walk to it.
We see a fair amount of that now in the Grainer District. You know, it's a kind of a big open asphalt ocean right now, very unstructured parking. We get a lot of walking traffic to and from downtown. I think in this design, we were seeing that when we were out on our walk, and when they're taking pictures, we're seeing people walking through districts. I think the one thing that we really have been trying to emphasize, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that once they find a spot, we don't want them to have to move around. We want them to be able to connect and make the connections. When we did the Northeast Gateway study, they did overlays of circles. It was a quarter mile, so that connection from downtown to the Grainer District fit that, and then the Grainer District kind of serves as the next launching pad into the Northeast Gateway. So if we can get people to park downtown, stay in town a little longer, explore, support more businesses, more collaboration with downtown in our area, and how we can make those connections so they're more pedestrian friendly, then once they get to that spot, and we work strategically with partnerships to create some of that in the new development, I think we'll see that work, and I think parking will fit. It will fit into that process.
I agree with everything you say, Kelly. My concern is if there's no parking downtown now,
They won't come downtown.
where's all these people gonna go?
Right, yeah.
To walk it?
And understanding that this is a vision down the road, and today we have accustomed to be able to park on Alpine wherever you want. And so there's gonna be a lot of, people that are accustomed to having that's a takeaway from them, and we're not where we're beginning with the end in mind, but to get where we need to be is gonna be some heartache.
So before we close this section out, I don't know, Kevin or Larry or Remy, do you have any other feedback that you want to give the committee about what you've heard? I mean, I think you've already done so. This is kind of the last call for tonight.
I think that, kind of restate what I said initially, just that I do think the work that's been done is really impressive, and I'm very grateful to everybody that's served on the committee and staff and committee members alike. So I honestly say thank you for all of that work, and I look forward to seeing what happens.
I'll say one thing, just knowing the council, I think we'll have some really good discussions, but we're gonna want some numbers. We're gonna wanna take a look at some of those final things that, Walt, you were talking about. We're that kind of council. Give us the hard stuff, and then we'll make a determination from that, where our comfort level might lie.
Yeah.
And now, to get to that though, because I've heard that a couple of different times about we need the numbers. The process to get to that, Doug, because that means staff, is this the issue where we need to talk about, do we need to apply some funds to the current design efforts ongoing with the Alpine Avenue? Do we need to talk about additional funds for that to get those numbers, or how do we get those numbers? How do we get decision data?
The numbers require a design. The design is not done yet, so there's a process. We have to be patient until that design is at a point where we can do some, at least back of the envelope numbers and estimates. Once we have that number, which will occur later this fall, early winter, we can then start to apply that to the ground and say, well, $1 million will buy us 2 blocks. Stands to reason that $1 million will buy us 2 more blocks. Then we can turn to our friends in the financial world and say, what is the cost to us to ask for get a $1 million loan, have coverage ratios and everything else in place to make that happen. And bring that question package, if we will, back to our urban renewal agency board for discussion and decision to move forward.
Can we get say, January before the goal session for the council, or would you anticipate that, that'll come sometime afterwards?
I
Oh.
I wish I could tell you, I just know we're having a 30% drawing discussion now, whether that's enough to do an estimate in which we could go out with some confidence and bond. I'm just not feeling real warm and fuzzy right now with that. January seems a reasonable time, but I think we'll commit to that tonight with not knowing all the information that would get us to that point. Whether we can get to that.
Okay.
Let's transition to our last agenda item. I heard Walt say, we need some of the basics, a basic understanding of how our relationship here works with the Urban Renewal Board, and are we meeting, when are we meeting like this? Is it going to be once a year, twice a year, quarterly? When do you want to meet with us and talk with us? What counsel do you want in terms of reporting from us? What are the bones of the relationship? I don't know. Walt, would you add any other questions to that list?
No, I think you hit it pretty well there. I mean, let me just say, I think quarterly meetings of this type is too much. I'm not sure that biannual is too much, given in the early years and how many decision points there are along the way. I'm not sure that biannual joint meetings aren't a good idea. I think it's important for the council to get feedback from the committee and the committee to get feedback from the council, and this is a great way to do it. I mean, I think this has been terrific tonight.
Let me share also that on a monthly basis, I take a report back to the council along with Doug. So we'll do a brief overview of committees that we're on and where we're at. It's not real in depth, but it does share with council where we are and what we're doing at that particular time. Sometimes if a council meeting runs long, then we bypass that, and then you're 2 weeks down and then you move past that a bit. But I want each member of the council that's on a committee has an opportunity to update so the council somewhat has a working feeling for what's going on. But I would submit personally, from my perspective, absolutely this type of a format twice a year. I'm feeling really comfortable, and setting it like this, we start at a time and we go as long as needed, and even if it does interrupt our council meeting a little bit, so be it. We'll do what we need to do.
I'll agree exactly, Scott. I think quarterly's too often. I think biannual or twice a year is great. I think we're moving so fast. Is there a potential that certain issues may come up that may require an hour and a half meeting someplace? But if there is, you schedule it when it's needed. But to schedule quarterly, I think with everything the committee has to do and they're working on, everything the council has to do and they're working on, I think quarterly meetings is just...
And then I'll throw out, just as we have in any committee assignments, the committee meets on a monthly basis, just as the committees that you guys are on. And if you ever have a desire, it's an open meeting. Feel free to drop in and just, and we spend about an hour, 4 to 5. And this is a very open format that we would have any member of the council that wants to drop in just to see what's going on, if you're feeling like you want to get a little more down in the nitty-gritty.
Are you going to meet as an urban renewal agency board anytime you want at a council, or are you going to have those scheduled, announced, planned meetings?
The urban renewal agencies are noticed just like the city council.
just like
Usually they're on the same
And
night.
they're always going to be separate from the
Yes.
council meeting?
Yeah, they
And
are
how
separate.
often are those meetings?
As often as needed.
I just want to, are they
That's
scheduled?
what saying, I think, are you
They're
talking,
noticed.
they're saying twice a year.
Oh, okay,
biennium.
all right.
And they're financially somewhat driven a little bit, isn't it, at this point?
But like, like the mayor said, if there's something hot that we'll always be here.
Right.
If there's something hot and you need us, we're here.
Well, no, I just mean whether you have a fixed schedule.
Yeah, but I think
for
the
your-
council, as the urban renewal agency,
Yeah.
I think it's about every 6 months right now, or whenever needed, we will start with like the city council meeting, and we try to do it on a night where there isn't a lot, and then we will adjourn that and go into the urban renewal agency meeting. But they'll both, when we do that, they're both noticed.
But your meeting with this group could also be an urban renewal agency meeting.
It could be.
At the same time,
It could be.
simultaneous or afterwards, or,
Yeah.
It can be part of that meeting.
yeah. So, okay.
And normally, the Urban Renewal Board, the council, is going to be meeting at the time that it adopts and holds public hearings for a budget.
Yes.
That's one time of the year, and then you would think maybe 6 months after that, kind of this time of the year, is the other logical time.
Now, I will say, though, that when the budget cycle, this discussion should probably happen outside, because you get drugged down by the budget. There's not time to have the budget discussions and get that laid to bed and look at the visioning thing and those decisions that you want for the future. So for the agency, it may mean that we meet 3 times a year.
Yeah.
For this whole combined joint session, though, the twice-a-year portion will be
Because up to this
great.
point, we've not had much of a discussion on budget, but it will be more
Going to get
germane, yes.
That's what I was going to say. Twice a year sounded good. I just wondered when the 2 meetings should occur. Should we be talking about bonding or loans or whatever? Should they be coordinated somehow with budget meetings? We should think about when those 2 meetings should be.
I would think, Marilyn, myself, that they should be sometime before the budget process and meetings start to provide input into the budget meeting. And then maybe again, the budget year starts in July, maybe again in October, so like March and October, someplace along.
Sounds good.
Or Rick, too, as we go into our annual planning, I'm wondering if that might be before or after. Maybe we have some takeaways from our annual planning that relates to this. I don't know.
Well, see, and that's why I'm thinking, Scott, if we did it, if we did usually last week in January, first 2 weeks in February, we do our council goal
that's
setting.
right.
Then if we turn around in a month later and do the first meeting, and then 6 months later do the other meeting, I think that's a pretty good cycle. That's just my opinion.
And I think we'll do that, once we know, when we get the numbers, that's going to be the driver. And
Yeah.
that may be just before the goal setting, maybe just after the goal setting.
Sounds good.
So, okay, for this combined group, twice per year work session, the board and committee rep, Scott, gives a report monthly on the committee meetings. So there is that periodic update. And an ad hoc or a called as needed for late-breaking news can be done at any time. The URD board meets twice per year. Those meetings are noticed. And having these meetings, the work sessions, in accordance with the budget and the planning process is probably a good thing. So if I heard October and March, I think that probably is just about right. What about other kinds of expectations? Does the committee ever struggle to understand, for instance, the parameters that the playing field you're enabled to play in? Do you wonder about whether or not there should be any kind of written reports? Do you have minutes? Do you wonder if they're adequate? I mean, are there any other kinds of process guidelines that would be helpful to the committee?
Well, I know Doug does a great agenda helping prepare us. So having staff putting the agenda together and communicating, I mean, that has been very critical for us. And Doug will start us off and update us, and then over to Walt, and then we just move on. So having Doug's participation is a concept for the committee.
Staffing to the committee is very important. I mean, without that staffing, this committee would not be a productive committee. We do have minutes, and those do get disseminated. I think that probably the biggest challenge for me certainly is knowing when it's time to go back and do a revisit of the feasibility assumptions that the whole plan's based upon. We haven't quite gotten far enough down the road to actually formally do that, but that's going to take some consultant time. But we're approaching that point, because before you do any borrowing, that's going to have to happen. And so I see that over the next 6 months to a year, there's going to be taking a look at the original assumptions that the projections were based on, seeing if we're ahead or behind, and how Eco Northwest or whoever views the coming 5 years as opposed to the way we originally looked at it. So those are very important revisits to have to do, and to not let that just not to, the longer we let our assumptions lie without re-examining them, the more risk we take, I think. So that's what I think about, and we talk about that in the committee. It does take funding and consultants to do that, so we don't have an independent ability to initiate that.
Anything else that as a committee member you feel you need in terms of support from the city or its resources?
At the risk of speaking too much, I want to just say that I'm very grateful to the city that we've had the kind of staff commitment that the city has made. I mean, we've had water and light present at almost every meeting and gotten the kind of critical, important, kind of cautionary feedback that staff typically will provide. But that's also true of the city engineer's office, where we've gotten good input from the city engineer and timely input and attendance at our advisory committee meetings when we request it, and sometimes even without requests. So I don't see that as a need, because I think it's already being met, but it's really critical to the process being effective.
And it is also, staff has extra time if you need to stop by and talk to them in addition to what we've talked about at our meetings. They're always available and open for that. So.
Extra time,
I don't.
Makes the time for Cassie.
Yes, that's better put, yeah.
You know, in a way, you could think about this as a template for how a committee like this should operate. So I think if you do have some support needs that are filled now, but they're important, like the staffing, it's probably good to memorialize them here in this discussion, if there's anything like that.
Well, you know, one comment I'd like to make, and I don't know if other people have some, I think it's very important, too, that one thing, not just appreciate this committee, but I think one thing that I was taught years and years ago when I first came on the Planning Commission, then on the City Council as a counselor, and I think we take it to heart. I mean, I do, and I think the rest of the council does, and I think as long as we remember this, we'll be okay, is that the City Council, as our body, we're responsible for one thing, and that's setting policy. Staff is responsible for implementing policy, and I think the works of this committee and several other committees show it. You know, we have a policy we want to set, and I think we have a staff that makes sure that that policy is implemented, and I think that's what makes City of McMinnville so successful at times, because the council per se as individuals, not that we don't, we try very hard not to get involved with the implementation of the policy. And so to hear that our staff works well, not just this committee, but I could talk about the Visit McMinnville, I could talk about MEDP, I could talk about the MDA, I could talk about the chamber, all of them, that we leave it up to our staff, and thank God we have a good staff that can implement the policies we see.
They don't just take the time for the committee. They go one step further. They educate the committee
exactly
so
right.
that we can do what we're supposed to do. They go out and find the experts in Albany and Sherwood to bring them in and teach us what we need to know. It's invaluable. It helps you do the job.
Goes right back to one of the opening comments about trust between the council and various organizations, and I think it's that level of detail and staff involvement that makes that kind of the glue that brings that all together for us as citizen participants. I just want to say one other thing that I think is sometimes maybe above and beyond when staff does, is that they do a really good job of keeping everything on the web. So designs, meetings, minutes, I've been able to share that with a lot of people, educate other citizens with that. And so I think that's, it's hard to sit here and say, well, what do you need? Because I think we have so many great resources and tools that are being provided to us. So I think I'll just jump on the bandwagon and shout out. That's one thing that I find very helpful. Investors that I work with in my development, I've been able to keep them educated on what's going on, position them so that as opportunities come up, we can hopefully participate more in the private investment side of things. So just having all those resources available online that'd be easy it'd be an easy thing to shove off, but I really appreciate having all those things available, so. I think one of the things that became evident, not to talk, but we had our recent session with Assistant City Manager for Sherwood, specifically. The structure that we've gone through and the processes that we've gone through and the city involvement and staff involvement, it's amazing to me. I think we probably have no idea how many mistakes we've avoided by going through that process. To hear some of the stories that they went through in their organizations and kind of finding their way, and to have the foresight to bring those individuals in and let us share some of their stories, I think was very beneficial for us as a committee, but not in just how do we move forward, but how do we avoid mistakes, and it was real evident there's a lot of mistakes we could have made that we didn't, with some real great staff leadership. So I think Doug's previous involvement in Klamath Falls and places before, I think, was very evident in this process, because the process was very structured, and with the involvement of the different people on the committee, I feel like it's a very valuable process for all of us. So.
Doug, was that an organization just for urban renewal that they were talking about?
It was the city of Klamath Falls. It set up the organization. They were much like the McMinnville City Council.
She said you should join, it costs you some money, but it's worth it. What was she talking about?
There's the Association of Oregon Redevelopment Agencies, or AORA.
Okay.
Which we intend, unless the council directs me or my boss directs me otherwise, to join. I think that's a great resource for this group, is they have a wealth of information on their website that we could take advantage of and help to continue our education process.
I'd like to say, after going to the League of Oregon Cities Conference, everybody sat through AORA's presentation. It was very evident it's not something we would like to do, that we almost have to do to join them.
Okay, great.
So I think we're just about at the end of the meeting. Any thoughts in closing?
I'd raise just the question, not to try to answer it, but whether, how much urban renewal is being done for McMinnville residents and jobs, et cetera, and how much of it might be done for visitors. I think there's a new dynamic happening. It's always been envisioned on all this that, we're doing this for McMinnville and for the people here, and there's suddenly $500,000 a year going to be spent to draw more visitors than we have now, and that's going to push more need for parking and more need for rooms and more need for this, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but this effort could easily get pushed towards, well, we need to do this in the downtown because of all these visitors, and I guess there's decisions that you make at the time, but I just think that's a new player in the game that we have to really keep close marks of as we're going forward, because it could really change the dynamic of what we need to do.
And I think that's a fine line, Jeb, because it's exactly right. What I hope is by going through all this, it's going to attract more and more visitors. But what it does, it helps, to me, hopefully, increases more and more employment within the city of McMinnville, which is good for our residents. So, it's kind of a catch-22. Where does one stop and the other starts?
But the tour buses are coming.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts in closing?
Just one small spin-off of that is, I think that is why it's so important to keep our eye also on the ball in terms of keeping our manufacturers very healthy in this process, because I love tourism, of course, but also service industry jobs are typically very low-paying jobs, and we need to make sure that we also have our eye on holding on to manufacturing jobs that have the potential of hopefully being higher wage-earning jobs for our residents.
I think the acknowledgement that that balance is very tenuous at times is really important, because it does help move some of the decisions forward. We have tourists that come in. That's a form of economic development. The infrastructure is a form of economic development. Things like Kelly's development, but there is a balance, especially for jobs.
Mm-hmm.
One of the good things about the representation in this group, in going through the processes that we go through, and the recommendations, is you have 3 economic development board members here. So there's constant communication between organizations. So I think just having that mutual representation, we've tried to do that all throughout different entities with Chamber of Commerce and whatnot, to have mutual representation, and having Scott on our committee has been huge for the city council representation. So I think you see a lot of cross efforts, different people to make those connections and keep those, so that one thing doesn't kind of get pushed out in front of the other, or something left behind, more importantly. So I think, having three people here on that board is a great help as we guide our resources through the economic development as well, and how we can. They'll come together. There's going to be stuff within this entity and economic development. They're going to come together. State resources can be brought in, different things to make projects happen as well. I've been a participant of some of those state funds to do business stuff. So there's ways to bring that in to help production-based type business, manufacturing, food production, things like that. So I think we've got a good representation, cross-representation. Took me a long time to say that, didn't it? Sorry.
You did well, though, Kelly.
Well, it's exciting to see how quickly this committee is moving, and, the transportation bond really front-loaded this. But I could say the same thing with tourism and our visit McMinnville. You want to see a committee that is moving along much quicker, just because of what's happening there. And so that's all going to work hand in hand with the things that we're doing in Alpine, Granary, 3rd Street. They're going to be coming, you guys. And as Cassie and I know, because we sit on that committee, we were putting more time into that committee than this committee, and so it was almost a full-time job.
Well, now you're retired, Scott.
But again, it's just, we are at a very interesting crossroads with the things that we've been talking about and planning, all of a sudden are in a position to be moving forward in a big way.
Doug, do we have any other business? I think we're at the end of our agenda.
No, our calendar does.
Okay.
No, it's been a tremendous year.
Anybody else, any other business for this part of the meeting?
No, I think when you get the entire dais covered, I think we may be coming to an end.
We still have some room. We can fill out a couple more pages.
Yeah, we don't have that much paper even at our annual, do we?
No.
No, I'm going to say this is much, but if you look at our goal setting, Sue's done our goal setting for more years than I could ever remember. I think when I first came on the council, we used to kind of start with about this many sheets. Now we're lucky to fill 2 or 3, I think.
That's right. You guys get right down to it.
That's right.
I would just like to say that I work with quite a few cities, and I'm just always amazed by the elegance of the public involvement process in the city of McMinnville. And, the civility of your structures here really show in the beauty of your town. So I'm a big fan. I truly am. I so admire what you've done here in your city. It's lovely. You're all to be congratulated. Absolutely.
Hey, that being said, if nobody has anything else, do you have any more closing remarks?
I do not.
If not, it is now 8:55, and I will officially adjourn the meeting of the Urban Renewal Agency and McMinnville Urban Renewal Advisory. And if we can take about 5 minutes and we'll go break, we'll probably sit here And the audience, we'll see who's got anything to say, but we're gonna move right into our city council.
Sitting on the doghouse.
Hey, you guys get a lead.